Hello everyone, welcome back. This is a story from Her Silent Revenge, and it has taken a turn you absolutely didn't expect. Let's begin.
At my son's 6th birthday party, as 35 guests gathered around the cake, my husband leaned close to my ear and whispered, "You're just a freeloader." Then he straightened up, flashing a perfect smile at the crowd, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. Seconds later, I saw his sister behind the bar quietly tilting a small bottle into the margarita she'd just made for me. From across the courtyard, my husband glanced over and nodded slowly. I just smiled calmly and put the glass back in her hand, the glass they thought would knock me out. In that instant, I knew this party was about to turn into something none of them would ever forget. I really appreciate you choosing to spend your time here. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Comment your location below. I'd also love to hear, how are you feeling today? Just so you know, this story includes fictional elements crafted for storytelling. Any similarities to actual names or events are unintentional, but the lessons I'm sharing are deeply meaningful. The words came in a whisper so quiet that only I could hear them. "You're just a parasite, Elle." My husband's breath was warm against my ear, his smile never wavering as 35 guests watched our son blow out 6 candles shaped like velociraptors. Owen's cheeks puffed out as he made his wish. His brand new dinosaur watch glinting on his small wrist, the camera hidden behind the T-Rex's painted eye, recording everything to a cloud server only I could access. Dominic straightened and walked away, already greeting James Rodriguez, the CFO of Cascade Bay Medical Center. I stood frozen beside the cake table, my smile locked in place by years of surgical training. Owen launched himself at me, sticky with frosting. "Did you see Mama? I saw baby." I kissed his head, and he raced back to his friends. I scanned the crowd with a trauma surgeon's clinical eye. 35 guests. Every single one chosen by Dominic. 8 hospital administrators, 5 attorneys, 4 Montessori school board members. Not a single doctor among them, except us. 2 months ago, I'd found the notebook. 23 pages documenting my instability. Every double shift, every missed parent-teacher conference, every sign that doctor. Ella Hartwell was unfit to be a mother. It ended with one line, "Public incident witnesses essential." He wasn't planning to leave me. He was planning to destroy me. My eyes found him near the outdoor bar talking to his brother Julian. Julian palmed something small and metallic, passing it to their sister Vanessa with a whisper. Vanessa stood behind the bar recording for her 200,000 Instagram followers. Julian leaned close, his lips moving fast. Vanessa nodded, laughing for the camera, and poured tequila into a blender. Her hand moved to her pocket. When it emerged, she was holding a small glass vial. She uncapped it smoothly and tilted it over one of the plastic margarita cups. My breath stopped. Sedatives, enough to make someone disoriented, confused. A public breakdown. A trauma surgeon losing control in front of witnesses who would testify I was dangerous. Vanessa capped the vial and picked up the poisoned margarita. I could tell by the way she held it. Her finger pressed against a small chip on the rim. She set it on a wooden tray and added 1 clean margarita beside it. 2 identical cups. She lifted the tray and walked straight toward me. I stood frozen as Vanessa stopped 2 feet away. "Elle, I made you something special, a margarita with extra salt, just the way you like it." She tilted the tray toward me. The cup on the left had the chip on the rim, the poisoned one. Her finger touched the chip mark. "This one's yours. The other one is for Patricia." I reached forward. "Vanessa." A woman's voice, high and excited. Melissa Reed, one of Vanessa's influencer friends, waving from the side gate. "Vanessa, I didn't know you'd be here." Vanessa's head whipped around. "Oh my God, Mel." 3 seconds, that's all I had. My hand moved with surgical precision. I reached for both cups simultaneously and switched them. The poisoned cup moved right. The clean cup moved left. The chip mark now faced backward, invisible. 2 seconds. Vanessa turned back unaware. "Sorry about that, Ella here." She picked up the left cup, the clean one, and held it out. "Extra salt just for you." I took it. "You're so thoughtful, Vanessa." She picked up the right cup, the poisoned one, and turned toward the patio. From across the yard, I caught movement. Dominic stood near the bounce house watching. His eyes tracked Vanessa, walking away from me, the cup in my hand. Then he did something that made my blood freeze. He looked directly at Vanessa and gave a slow, deliberate nod. Approval. Confirmation. Vanessa had delivered the poison. Ella was holding the cup. The plan was working. Vanessa's shoulders relaxed. She believed the hardest part was over. Dominic turned back to Rodriguez, satisfied. I raised my cup and took a small sip. Clean. Just tequila and lime. I turned toward my mother, helping Owen with presents. Behind me, Vanessa's voice. Patricia, I made you a margarita extra salt, just how you like it. Oh, how sweet. But I'm driving. Why don't you have it? You've been working so hard. Pause. Oh, I couldn't. I insist. Cheers to you. Longer pause. Well, okay, cheers. I counted to 15. My hand tightened on Owen's shoulder. Then I heard it, a confused gasp. I turned. Vanessa stood near the patio, one hand pressed to her forehead, the other holding the empty cup. Patricia looked concerned. Vanessa, you okay? Vanessa blinked rapidly. I feel... The cup slipped from her fingers. Vanessa... Her hand shot out, gripping the table edge. Her body swayed. Then she collapsed. The sound wasn't a scream. It was a choked gasp that cut through the party noise. 35 guests turned. Nobody moved. Then chaos. Children crying. Beer toppling. Parents yanking kids from the bounce house. Rodriguez ran toward Vanessa's convulsing body. I was already moving. Everyone back, I'm a trauma surgeon. Give her space. Someone call 911. 3 parents with CPR training converged. Rodriguez crouched beside me. What do we do? Walsh appeared, phone to his ear, calling 911. Across the lawn, Dominic's face had drained of color. His mouth hung open, eyes locked on his sister, convulsing. Beside him, Julian froze, gripping the fence. They'd expected me to be the one on the ground. Julian's lips moved. Dominic grabbed his arm, shaking his head sharply. Don't speak. Don't help. Don't reveal anything. I turned back to Vanessa. Her body jerked violently. Eyes rolled back, foam at her mouth. It's vasovagal syncope, I announced loudly. Heat exhaustion. It looks dramatic, but it's not immediately life-threatening. The software engineer nodded, relieved. The Montessori teacher supported Vanessa's neck. Someone fanned her with a plate. Rodriguez looked desperate. Should we move her? No, keep her in recovery position, monitor breathing. I checked her pulse. 142 beats per minute. Too fast, pupils dilated. Classic sedative toxicity. I swept my fingers through her mouth. Clean. Liquid sedative then, already metabolizing. Walsh's voice. Paramedics 7 minutes out. I watched Vanessa's convulsions slow. Her breathing turned shallow, labored. Respiratory depression. My eyes swept the grass, there half hidden under a napkin, the small glass vial, empty. I lunged for it. Wait, this was on the ground where she was standing. Rodriguez's eyes widened. What is that? I don't know. But look at her pupils, the spasms. This isn't heat exhaustion. Then what? Toxicological poisoning. She ingested something. We need gastric lavage. Activated charcoal. The crowd shifted from concern to horrified. Sirens wailed. Vanessa's breathing stuttered. Glasgow coma score 7. 12 breaths per minute. Too slow. The ambulance screamed in. Paramedics burst through with a gurney. I rattled off vitals, GCS 7 tachycardia, at 142 pupils dilated, suspected toxic ingestion. They loaded Vanessa onto the gurney. A man in a dark suit stepped through the crowd. Tall, late 40s face that had seen everything. He moved with quiet authority. He stopped beside me and pulled out an FBI badge. Dr. Hartwell, he said quietly. Special Agent Derek Vaughn, we need to talk, privately. 40 seconds had passed since Vanessa drank. Her smile flickered just for a heartbeat before her knees buckled. It happened fast. One moment she was laughing at something Julian had said, the empty margarita cup dangling from her manicured fingers. The next, her hand shot out to grip the fence knuckles, white her body swaying like a tree in a windstorm. The cup fell. Tequila-soaked ice scattered across the grass. Then she collapsed. The sound she made wasn't a scream. It was something worse, a choked gasp animal and raw that cut through the party noise like a blade. 35 guests turned as one. For a terrible suspended moment, nobody moved. We all just stood there, frozen in that uniquely American paralysis that happens when something goes catastrophically wrong at a social gathering and no one wants to be the first to acknowledge it. Then chaos. Children started crying. Someone's beer toppled off the buffet table. A tray of salmon skewers hit the ground. Parents lunged for the bounce house, yanking kids out like the inflatable castle had caught fire. James Rodriguez, the CFO, who spent his days in spreadsheets and budget meetings, dropped his IPA and ran toward Vanessa's convulsing body, his expensive loafers sinking into the lawn. I was already moving. Everyone back. My voice came out in the command tone I used in the trauma bay, the one that made residents and nurses snap to attention. I'm a trauma surgeon. Give her space. Someone call 911. Now. Dick. 3 parents with CPR certification badges on their keychains converged on Vanessa from different directions. I recognized them from school pickup, a software engineer named Chris, a Montessori teacher named Rachel, and a real estate agent whose name I couldn't remember. Good people. Responsible people. People who'd taken weekend first aid courses at the Red Cross and kept their certifications current for exactly this kind of emergency. People who had absolutely no idea what they were looking at. Rodriguez crouched beside me, his face pale. What do we do? His voice was steady, but his hands shook. David Walsh from HR appeared on my other side phone, already pressed to his ear, reciting our address to the 911 dispatcher. Across the lawn, I caught Dominic's face. The color had drained from it. His mouth hung half-open, eyes locked on his sister's convulsing body, with an expression I'd never seen before, pure, undiluted horror. Beside him, Julian had frozen mid-step, one hand gripping the bounce house netting so hard the entire structure shuddered. A child inside started crying. They'd expected me to be the one on the ground. Julian's lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear over the chaos. Dominic grabbed his brother's arm fingers, digging in hard enough to leave marks. He shook his head once. Sharp. Definitive. His eyes darted toward me, then away. He couldn't help. Not without revealing he knew exactly what was happening. I turned back to Vanessa. Her body jerked in rhythmic spasms, muscles contracting so violently I could hear her teeth clack together. Her eyes had rolled back. Foam gathered at the corners of her mouth. Every instinct I had screamed poisoning sedative overdose, probably mixed with something else. But I had 90 seconds. Maybe less. 90 seconds before someone with actual medical knowledge showed up and started asking questions I couldn't answer yet. It's vasovagal syncope. I announced loud enough for Thomas Garrett, the custody lawyer, to hear from where he stood, frozen by the bar. Heat exhaustion triggered a fainting episode. It looks dramatic, but it's not immediately life-threatening. Chris, the software engineer, nodded relief, flooding his face. He'd seen people faint before. This looked close enough to his CPR training videos. Rachel positioned herself at Vanessa's head, supporting her neck exactly like the Red Cross had taught her. The real estate agent started fanning Vanessa with a paper plate. Rodriguez looked up at me, desperate for guidance. Should we move her inside, get her water? No. Keep her in recovery position. Monitor her breathing. I placed 2 fingers on Vanessa's carotid. Her pulse hammered against my fingertips, 142 beats per minute, way too fast for simple heat exhaustion. Her skin was flushed and hot pupils blown wide at 7 millimeters. Classic signs of sedative toxicity that none of these well-meaning people could recognize. I bent closer, pretending to check her airway, and quickly swept my fingers through Vanessa's mouth. I was looking for pill residue, the gritty texture of crushed tablets that would tell me she'd ingested something solid. But her mouth was clean, just the sharp bite of tequila and lime. Liquid sedative, then. Dissolved in the margarita, which meant it was already in her bloodstream, already metabolizing. The evidence was disappearing with every heartbeat. Walsh's voice cut through my thoughts. Paramedics are 7 minutes out. 7 minutes. I counted to 90 in my head, watching Vanessa's convulsions gradually slow from violent spasms to intermittent twitches. Her breathing turned shallow, labored. This wasn't syncope anymore. This was respiratory depression, the kind that killed people if you didn't intervene. But I needed one more thing. My eyes swept the grass near the fence where Vanessa had been standing, there half hidden under a toppled lawn chair where it must have fallen from Julian's pocket during his panicked freeze. A small glass vial, maybe 20 milliliters with a plastic dropper cap, empty. I lunged for it, my hand closing around the warm glass. Wait, everyone wait. I held the vial up so the August sun caught it, made it gleam, made it impossible to miss. This was on the ground, right where she was standing. Rodriguez's eyes went wide. What is that? I don't know, but... I turned back to Vanessa, let my voice shift from confident to uncertain the way doctors sound when a diagnosis suddenly changes. Actually, look at her pupils. And the muscle spasms. This isn't heat exhaustion. Then what is it? Rachel's voice pitched higher. Toxicological poisoning. I met Rodriguez's eyes. She ingested something. We need gastric lavage. We need activated charcoal. We need to preserve whatever's in her system before it's too late. The crowd's energy shifted from concerned to horrified. Someone behind me gasped. A child wailed. Rodriguez stared at the vial in my hand like I was holding a live grenade. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Vanessa's breathing stuttered. Her Glasgow coma score had dropped to 7 eyes opening only to pain, incomprehensible sounds, minimal motor response. Critical territory. I positioned her more carefully in recovery position, monitoring her airway, counting her breaths. 12 per minute. Too slow. The sedative was winning. The ambulance screamed into our driveway. Paramedics burst through the back gate with a gurney and medical bags. I rattled off vitals like I was presenting a case in the ERG-CS7 tachycardia at 142 pupils dilated to 7 millimeters suspected toxic ingestion unknown substance. They worked fast. IV line, oxygen, monitors beeping. They loaded Vanessa onto the gurney, her body small and broken-looking against the white sheets. As they wheeled her toward the ambulance, a man in a dark suit stepped through the crowd. He was tall, maybe late 40s, with the kind of face that had seen things and filed them away for later. He moved like someone used to being in control of rooms without having to announce it. He stopped beside me, reached into his jacket, and pulled out an FBI badge. Dr. Hartwell, he said quietly, his voice pitched low enough that only I could hear over the chaos. Special Agent Derek Vaughn. We need to talk, privately. The pool house was quieter than I'd expected, insulated from the chaos still unfolding on the lawn. Through the small window, I could see guests clustered in uncertain groups, parents corralling children toward cars, Rodriguez speaking urgently into his phone. The party had collapsed as completely as Vanessa had. Derek Vaughn closed the door behind us and gestured to one of the wicker chairs Dominic had bought last summer, back when I'd still believed we were building a life together. I didn't sit. My scrubs were grass-stained from kneeling beside Vanessa, and my hands still shook with the adrenaline crash that always followed a trauma save. You handled that well. Derek's voice was measured professional. He loosened his tie, a small concession to the August heat, and set a worn leather briefcase on the glass coffee table. How much do you think they suspect that Vanessa was poisoned everyone? I crossed my arms. That the drink was meant for me. Dominic and Julian, no. No one else. He nodded slowly, processing. Up close, I could see the deep lines around his eyes, the silver threading through his dark hair. This was a man who'd spent 20 years looking at the worst humanity had to offer and had somehow remained steady. A wedding ring glinted on his left hand. I wondered if he had kids, if he worried about bringing this work home to them. Dr. Hartwell, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. He met my eyes. Are you surprised to see me here? The question landed like a scalpel between my ribs. I thought about lying. Thought about playing confused, demanding to know why the FBI was at my son's birthday party. But I was so tired of lying. 6 months of lying. 6 months of pretending my marriage wasn't a rotting corpse I was still dragging around. No, I said quietly. I'm not surprised. Derek exhaled, not quite relief, but something close. He opened the briefcase and pulled out a slim folder. You've been working with us for 6 months, since March 15th to be exact, the day you called our Medicare fraud hotline. The memory hit me like cold water. I'd been sitting in my car in the hospital parking garage, hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel, staring at the documents I'd found in Dominic's study the night before. 342 opioid prescriptions written in February alone. Patients I'd never heard him mention, a clinic called Cascade Pain Relief that didn't appear on any of his tax returns. I'd driven to work that morning like a ghost. Made it through 2 surgeries on autopilot, a motorcycle accident, a construction worker with a punctured lung, and then sat in my car during lunch and dialed a number I'd found on the FBI website. Anonymous tip line, the voice had said. Professional. Distant. I need to report Medicare fraud. My voice had cracked on the last word. My husband is running a prescription mill. They'd transferred me to Derek that same day. You've given us everything we needed, Derek said now, pulling documents from the folder. Financial records I'd photographed in Dominic's study while he was at the hospital. DEA logs I'd copied from his laptop. Patient charts showing a pattern that made my stomach turn. 42 people across 8 states, all prescribed massive quantities of oxycodone and fentanyl. Many of them showing signs of addiction that Dominic had documented and ignored. 4.3 million in fraudulent Medicare billing. Enough to put him away for 15 years even before tonight happened. Then why haven't you arrested him? The question came out sharper than I'd intended. If you have everything, why am I still sleeping in the same house as him? Because federal cases move slowly. We need ironclad evidence, multiple witnesses, a paper trail that can't be disputed. Derek leaned forward. But tonight changes things. Attempted murder is a state crime, Seattle PD's jurisdiction, not ours. But we can use it as leverage. Dominic is looking at attempted murder charges for poisoning his own sister. If he thinks he's going down anyway, he might be willing to give us his suppliers, the other doctors in the network, everyone above him in the chain. You want him to flip. I want to dismantle the entire operation. Your husband isn't working alone. There are at least 4 other physicians involved, maybe more. But Dominic is our way in. He pulled out a small device no bigger than a button. Which is why I need you to wear this for 72 hours starting now. Everything he says in your presence gets recorded. If he confesses to the poisoning or talks about the prescription mill, we'll have enough to move. I stared at the wire. It looked so small, so innocuous. You want me to go back into that house and pretend everything is normal. I want you to finish what you started 6 months ago. His voice gentled. I know this isn't easy, Dr. Hartwell. I know you didn't sign up to be an informant against your own husband, but you made the call. You reported him because you knew what he was doing was wrong. You've been building this case with us since March because you wanted justice. I wanted out. The words came before I could stop them. I wanted proof that I wasn't crazy, that the man I married had become someone I didn't recognize. Derek nodded slowly. When did you figure it out that he was running the mill? February 10th. I could still see the date on the documents. I thought he was having an affair. He'd been distant for months, working late, hiding his laptop. So I looked. I laughed, but it came out bitter. I was hoping to find hotel receipts. Instead, I found a pharmacy. And the custody strategy. When did you find that? June. My throat tightened. 23 pages. Every mistake I'd made as a mother, every shift I'd worked instead of attending a school event, every time I'd been too tired to read Owen a bedtime story. He was building a case to take my son. That's why you planted the camera. I nodded. I needed evidence of my own. Derek's phone buzzed against the glass table. He glanced at the screen and something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or concern. Harborview Medical Center just called. He looked up at me. Vanessa's awake. They did gastric lavage, gave her activated charcoal. She's groggy but conscious. And he paused. She's asking for you. Not Dominic. Not Julian. You. The pool house suddenly felt too small, the air too close. Through the window, I could see Dominic standing alone by the fence, his phone pressed to his ear. Was he calling the hospital, or was he calling Julian, trying to figure out how their plan had gone so catastrophically wrong? Why would she ask for me? I said, though part of me already knew. Derek stood tucking the wire back into his briefcase. Maybe because you're the only person who saved her today instead of trying to kill her. I returned home Sunday morning with hospital coffee cold in my hand and 18 hours of fluorescent lighting burned into my retinas. The drive from Harborview had taken 20 minutes through empty Seattle streets, the kind of early Sunday quiet that usually felt peaceful. Today it felt like the calm before a tsunami. My key wouldn't turn in the front door lock. I tried again, thinking exhaustion had made my hands clumsy. But the key that had opened this door for 7 years suddenly didn't fit. Fresh scratches marked the keyhole. New hardware. Installed sometime between yesterday afternoon and this morning. Dominic had changed the locks. A note was taped to the door, folded once. His precise surgical handwriting covered the page. Ella, you brought federal agents to our son's birthday party. You caused a medical crisis that nearly killed my sister. You've been acting erratically for months, and I can no longer trust Owen's safety in your care. I've filed for emergency custody. Owen is with me safe and secure. You can see him with supervision once the court approves visitation. This didn't have to happen this way. Dominic. My hands didn't shake when I pulled out my phone. That surprised me. I'd spent the night watching Vanessa drift in and out of sedated sleep, and I'd felt nothing but rage. But now, standing on my own front porch, reading my husband's careful gaslighting, I felt surgically calm. I dialed Jamal Reeves. He answered on the second ring. Dr. Hartwell, I was about to call you. He filed for emergency custody at 11 p.m. last night. Ex parte petition claiming you present immediate danger to your son. Papers rustled on his end. He's citing the FBI presence the medical emergency and 12 documented incidents over 6 months. Times you worked double shifts, missed school events, forgot soccer pickup. The custody hearing is Friday, August 18th, 9 a.m. Judge Rachel Thornton. The notebook. He was using every page of it. What's my move? You could report the illegal lockout. Washington is community property. He can't bar you without a court order. But forcing entry looks bad. Unstable doctor breaks into home, where child resides. He's baiting you, Elle. Don't give him the reaction he wants. Then what do I give him? Jamal paused. What do you have? I thought about 6 months of building a case. About documents I'd photographed and records I'd hidden. About the plan I'd started forming the day I found that notebook. I have his money, all of it. Explain. March 2020. I set up an LLC called Hartwell Medical Consulting. I've diverted $520,000 from my salary every year into that company. That LLC has been funding everything Dominic thinks he owns. I watched a neighbor's car pull out heading to Sunday brunch. His medical device startup that raised $1.2 million, that was me. The operating costs for Cascade Pain Relief. I've covered $280,000 over 2 years. Every investor he thinks he has is actually investing in my LLC, which then partners with his companies. I control the funding agreements. I control everything. Jamal let out a low whistle. You've been planning this for 3 years. I've been protecting myself. I just didn't know what I was protecting myself from until I found the notebook. I pulled up my banking app. Can you call the forensic accountant we used for the Patterson merger? I need every account frozen before markets open tomorrow. This is aggressive. He locked me out of my own house and took my son. My voice didn't rise. I know exactly where to cut to make it hurt. I'll make the calls. I hung up and stared at the note taped to my door. Behind it, somewhere in that house, was Owen's room. 7 years of his life I couldn't access. The height marks I'd penciled on his closet door frame every birthday, measuring how fast he was growing away from me. I couldn't stay here staring at a locked door. By evening, I'd checked into a downtown hotel, something generic and forgettable, where the desk clerk didn't recognize my name from the news. The room was sterile and silent. I sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing yesterday's grass-stained scrubs, and tried to remember the last time I'd been completely alone. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. A text message. I have the video, all of it. We need to meet. V. I stared at the screen. The dinosaur watch. Owen's birthday party. Every moment from the cake to the collapse recorded and uploaded to my private cloud server. But I'd never given Vanessa access to that footage, which meant she'd found it some other way. Or someone had shown it to her. I typed back when and where. The response came immediately tomorrow, 3 p.m., the coffee shop on Capitol Hill where nobody knows us. I sat there for a long moment holding my phone thinking about the video Vanessa claimed to have. Julian handing her the vial, Dominic nodding approval, Vanessa drinking. Everything that proved this wasn't an accident. Everything that could destroy Dominic's custody petition before Friday's hearing. My hands were shaking now. Not from fear, from something else entirely. I typed, "I'll be there." The screen glowed in the dark hotel room. One new message, "Come alone. Trust no one. Not even the FBI." Vanessa was already seated when I arrived, tucked into the back corner booth of a Capitol Hill coffee shop like she was hiding from the world. Maybe she was. She looked nothing like the Instagram influencer who'd posed behind the bar at Owen's party 2 days ago. The sundress and perfect makeup were gone, replaced by a worn gray hoodie and leggings. Her hair hung limp around her face. A hospital discharge bracelet still circled her wrist, the plastic edges frayed like she'd been picking at it. She was pale. Her hands trembled as she slid her phone across the scarred wood table. "Watch," she said, not a request, an order. I picked up the phone. The screen showed a paused video timestamp, Saturday, 2:31 p.m. Owen's dinosaur party. I recognized the angle head height on a 6-year-old the T-Rex watch camera I'd planted on my son's wrist. I pressed play. The video jerked and swayed with Owen's movements, but the audio was crystal clear. Julian appeared in frame, standing near the outdoor bar. He pulled something from his pocket, a small glass vial, maybe 20 milliliters. He uncapped it and leaned toward Vanessa, who stood behind the bar making margaritas for her phone camera. "Put this in Elle's drink." Julian's voice came through tinny but distinct. "The one with extra salt. She always orders extra salt." Vanessa took the vial, laughing. "What is it?" "Doesn't matter. Just do it." Julian glanced over his shoulder. The camera caught Dominic 15 feet away watching. Their eyes met. Dominic nodded once. Deliberate. Unmistakable. The video continued. Vanessa poured tequila, added the vial's contents to a plastic cup, reached for the salt. Then Julian came back, said something the camera didn't catch. Vanessa frowned, picked up the wrong cup, and drank. I watched myself start running across the lawn, watched Vanessa's face change, watched her fall. I set the phone down carefully. "You have the whole thing. Every second from the moment Owen put that watch on until the ambulance left." Vanessa pulled the phone back, her fingers shaking worse now. "Do you want to know what it's like to wake up in an ICU and have a nurse show you a TikTok video of yourself convulsing on a lawn?" I waited. 2.3 million views in 36 hours. Her voice cracked. The caption was, "Influencers Karma for Fake Life." The comments, she stopped, swallowed hard. 15,000 comments. All of them saying I deserved it, that I was fake, that wealthy people get what's coming to them. Vanessa. Lululemon dropped me Sunday morning, glossier by Sunday night. Blue Apron sent a 2-sentence email. "We're terminating our partnership effective immediately. Our values don't align with this incident." She laughed, but it came out sharp and broken. My values, like I poisoned myself, like I chose to have 2.3 million people watch me. She stopped again, her hands curled into fists on the table. $340,000 in annual sponsorships, gone. My Instagram lost 60,000 followers in one day. The brand I spent 5 years building is dead because my brother tried to poison you and I was stupid enough to drink it. I'd seen this before. Trauma survivors in my ER that moment when shock wore off and rage took over. Vanessa wasn't looking for redemption. She was looking for revenge. "What do you want?" I asked. "I want him to suffer worse than I did." She pulled a USB drive from her hoodie pocket and set it on the table between us. "I've been recording Dominic since 2021. 32 hours, 18 minutes of audio, family dinners, phone calls, times he got drunk and bragged to Julian about things he shouldn't have. Why 2021? Because that's when he stole $85,000 from our mother's estate." Her jaw tightened. "Mom died that spring. The estate went into probate. Dominic was executor. He borrowed the money for his medical device startup and told me I'd get my share eventually. I didn't, so I started documenting everything." She pushed the USB drive closer to me. "It's all there. Dominic coaching Julian on how to gaslight you into a psychiatric hold. Conversations about the prescription mill he bragged about writing 340 opioid scripts in 1 month. And she paused. There's a recording from November 2022. Dominic telling Julian that Maggie Brennan's malpractice settlement was sealed, that the hospital buried the report, that nobody would ever know he operated drunk. The name landed like a scalpel between my ribs. Maggie Brennan. I didn't recognize it, but the context was clear enough. Malpractice, sealed settlement, operated drunk. How many recordings mention patients? I asked. 6, maybe 7. Dominic likes to brag when he thinks he's gotten away with something. Vanessa's voice went flat. He's been getting away with things his whole life. Someone needs to stop him. I thought about Derek Vaughn's wire, about 72 hours of recording Dominic's confession, about the FBI case built on 6 months of documentation. This USB drive was gasoline on an already burning fire. What do you want in return? Money. Enough to start over somewhere he can't touch me. She met my eyes. And I want to watch him lose everything. His medical license, his custody case, his freedom. I want him in prison thinking about what he did to me every single day. I pulled a manila envelope from my bag and slid it across the table. Inside $50,000 in hundreds, withdrawn from my LLC's business account Friday afternoon as part of my exit strategy. Insurance, I'd told myself then. Now it was buying an ally. Vanessa opened the envelope, glanced inside, and nodded. This is a transaction, not friendship. I know. And if you screw me over, I won't, because we both want the same thing. I picked up the USB drive. Dominic destroyed. Vanessa leaned back in the booth, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. For the first time since I'd arrived, she looked almost satisfied. Who is Maggie Brennan? I asked. Vanessa's face darkened. The woman Dominic paralyzed, and her daughter is coming to testify. I spent 14 hours reviewing Vanessa's recordings. One name appeared 11 times, Maggie Brennan. Tuesday morning started in my hospital office with the door locked and my phone on silent. I downloaded all 32 hours of audio onto my laptop, the USB drive Vanessa had given me now, sitting in my hotel safe. The first mention of Maggie's name came at timestamp 04:17:33, Dominic's voice slightly drunk, telling Julian about a situation that had been handled. By noon, I'd mapped every mention, 11 references across 3 years. November 2022 was the most damning Dominic bragging that Maggie Brennan's malpractice settlement had been sealed, that the hospital had buried the surgical report, that nobody would ever know he'd operated drunk. I pulled up the hospital's surgical database. Our EMR system, Epic, the same software half the hospitals in America used, gave me access to every surgery performed at Cascade Bay since 2015. I entered Brennan Margaret and hit search. One result, June 15th, 2021. Routine lumbar fusion, L4 to L5. Surgeon Dr. Dominic Ashford. Outcome documented at discharge permanent paraplegia. T10 level. Complication notes. Unforeseen intraoperative complication. Patient counseled on risks. Outcome within standard surgical parameters. Unforeseen complication. My husband's careful language covering his tracks. I kept digging. The surgery start time logged in. Epic showed 11:18 a.m. pre-op workup completed at 10:42. Anesthesia induction at 11:03. Everything looked clean. Standard timing. Morning surgery well before lunch. But Vanessa had hacked more than just audio recordings. She'd given me access to Dominic's deleted iCloud emails messages he thought he'd erased, but that lived forever in Apple's servers if you knew where to look. I found the exchange dated June 16th, 2021, the day after Maggie's surgery. From Dominic Ashford to Julian Ashford, sent June 16th, 2021, 11:03. PM subject, no subject. I fucked up today. 3 drinks at lunch, then Brennan's fusion at 3:42. Hand slipped during decompression, nicked the cord. She's T10 complete. Julian, I need you to fix this. Change the surgery time. Make it look like I operated in the morning before I had anything to drink. From Julian Ashford to Dominic Ashford. Sent June 16th, 2021, 11:47 p.m. Subject RE, no subject. Already done. Surgery start shows 11:18 a.m. in Epic. Anesthesia times match. Pre-op notes match. You're clear. But Dom, you owe me for this. Big. My coffee had gone cold hours ago. I stared at the screen reading the emails 3 times to make sure I understood what I was seeing. Dominic had operated drunk. Blood alcohol level .11, well over the legal limit. He'd severed Maggie Brennan's spinal cord during what should have been a routine decompression. And Julian, with his hospital administrator access his super user privileges in the EMR system, had gone back and changed the timestamps. Surgery time shifted from 3:42 p.m. to 11:18 a.m., a 6.5-hour difference. Enough to make it look like Dominic had operated sober before his lunchtime martinis. I pulled up the original surgical scheduling system, a separate database that the OR used for room assignments. That system showed the truth. Brennan Lumbar Fusion OR7, scheduled start 15:33:30 p.m., actual start 15:42, 3:42 p.m.s. Julian had been thorough in Epic, but he'd missed the scheduling system. And he'd missed something else, a nursing note buried in the free text charting section. Post-lunch case, Dr. Ashford seemed fatigued, requested additional retraction assistance. Post-lunch case. A nurse had documented what Julian couldn't erase. I kept searching. If Dominic had done this once, had there been others? By 8 p.m., I'd found 6 more cases, all between 2018 and 2022. All surgeries scheduled between 1 p.m. and 4 p.m. lunch hours, when Dominic's 2-martini habit at the hospital cafeteria would have left him impaired. All with altered timestamps in Epic showing morning surgery times. All with outcomes ranging from chronic pain to nerve damage to, in one case, from 2019, death. The 2019 case was listed as patient noncompliance with post-operative antibiotic regimen. But the original nursing notes mentioned excessive bleeding during closure surgeon sutures loose. Dominic had been drunk. A patient had died. And Julian had changed the records to protect his brother. The hospital had settled with Maggie Brennan for $1.2 million in March 2022. Sealed NDA. No admission of fault. The surgical report stayed buried. But I knew something the hospital didn't know I knew. I'd been paying Maggie's nursing home bills since November 2021. $288,000 over 21 months. It had started as institutional guilt. I worked at the hospital that had destroyed this woman's life and then silenced her with money. I discovered her case when I'd overheard 2 risk management administrators in the parking garage talking about the Brennan settlement and how relieved they were it had stayed quiet. I'd found out which nursing home through a private investigator, set up an anonymous payment system through my LLC, funded her care at Evergreen Skilled Nursing Facility 40 miles north of Seattle. Not just custodial care, real rehabilitation. Activity-based restorative therapy 3 times a week. An epidural stimulation device implanted in January 2023, sending electrical pulses to her spinal cord to wake up dormant nerve pathways. Robotic exoskeleton training twice weekly. I'd done it because Maggie Brennan had an incomplete spinal cord injury. The surgical notes showed Dominic had severed 85% of the cord, not 100. That 15% gave her a 30 to 40% chance of regaining partial motor function if she had access to cutting-edge therapy. Therapy that cost more than her settlement would cover after legal fees and medical bills. I'd been funding her recovery for almost 2 years before I knew my husband was the one who'd put her in that wheelchair. Now I knew, and I needed to find her daughter. It took me 20 minutes to locate Claire Brennan through her LinkedIn profile. 26 years old paralegal at Pacific Northwest Victim Advocacy Project, a nonprofit that helped medical malpractice victims navigate the legal system. She dropped out of law school after her mother's surgery, couldn't afford tuition, and her mother's care simultaneously. I called the nonprofit's main line. A receptionist put me through. "This is Claire Brennan. My name is Dr. L. Hartwell. I'm a trauma surgeon at Cascade Bay Medical Center. I need to talk to you about your mother's case." Silence. Then, "Who gave you this number?" I've been paying your mother's rehabilitation bills for 21 months, anonymously, through a private account. I'm calling because I just discovered that my husband was your mother's surgeon, and I have proof he operated while intoxicated." The silence stretched longer. Finally, "When can we meet?" Thursday morning, my phone rang at 7:03 a.m., unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Derek had told me to screen calls, but something made me pick up. "Dr. Hartwell," Julian's voice shaking. "We need to talk. I have nothing to say to you. Tonight, midnight. The hospital loading dock." His words came fast, desperate. "Come alone. Please. If Dominic finds out I'm calling, he's going to file an involuntary psychiatric hold on you tomorrow morning, before the custody hearing. You'll be locked in a 72-hour evaluation, and he'll get Owen by default." The line went dead. I wore the FBI wire under my scrubs. Derek and 2 agents waited in a van 200 yards away, parked behind the maintenance building where the loading dock cameras couldn't reach them. The wire was smaller than I'd expected, no bigger than a shirt button adhesive backed, pressed against my sternum where my stethoscope usually rested. The microphone picked up my heartbeat, 112 beats per minute. Tachycardia. The same elevated pulse I saw in trauma patients right before we wheeled them into surgery. The loading dock was deserted at 11:47 p.m. Overhead lights cast harsh shadows across the concrete. A semi-trailer sat backed up to the dock, its cargo bay empty, driver long gone. This was where hospital supplies arrived at 3 a.m. every Tuesday, pallets of gauze and saline and surgical gloves, wheeled in by workers who never saw daylight. Now it was just me and the sound of my own breathing transmitted to Derek's laptop. Julian appeared from the south entrance, moving fast. He wore surgical scrubs too, like he'd come straight from the OR, but I knew he hadn't operated in years. Hospital administrators didn't cut. They just covered up the mistakes of people who did. He looked terrible. His face was gray, his eyes red-rimmed and darting. Sweat soaked through his scrub top despite the August night being cool enough for a jacket. When he reached me, he grabbed my arm, not rough, but desperate, like a drowning man lunging for a life preserver. "You came," he said, not grateful, surprised. "You said Dominic's filing a psych hold tomorrow if I didn't." "He is. He's already got the paperwork. Dr. Morrison from Psychiatric Evaluation owes him favors. Dominic's covered up her prescription pad losses for 2 years. She'll sign off on a 72-hour hold based on concerning behavior witnessed at family gathering. You'll be locked in a psych ward through the entire custody hearing." I pulled my arm free. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm done." His voice cracked. "I'm done covering for him. I'm done being his accomplice, and if I don't help you, he's going to kill you. Saturday night. He's already planning it." The wire against my chest recorded every word. "Explain." Julian glanced over his shoulder, paranoid, checking the shadows. "Saturday, August 19th, day after the custody hearing. Dominic's going to text you around noon. Say he wants to talk about reconciliation, about Owen, about making this work. He'll suggest meeting at the house at 8 p.m., just the 2 of you. And he's crushed 30 fentanyl pills, enough to kill someone twice your size. He'll put them in your wine while you're not looking. Maybe he'll pretend to take a phone call, turn his back for 30 seconds. After you drink it, you'll pass out in 10-15 minutes. He'll carry you upstairs, stage it like you climbed into bed yourself. He'll leave the pill bottle on your nightstand with a forged suicide note." My surgical calm was fracturing. "What note?" "Typed on your laptop, the one he stole from your hospital office last month. It says you're overwhelmed with guilt about Vanessa's poisoning, that you can't handle the custody battle, that Owen deserves better. Then Dominic calls 911 at 9:30, plays the devastated husband who found his wife too late." I made myself ask the next question. "Why are you helping me?" Julian laughed, but it came out broken. "I'm not helping you. I'm trying to save myself." He told me everything, the whole trap 5 layers deep, each one closing tighter until he couldn't breathe. He'd been covering for Dominic since medical school. When Dominic showed up to anatomy lab drunk sophomore year, Julian signed his attendance sheet. When Dominic plagiarized his residency research, Julian rewrote it. When Maggie Brennan's surgery went wrong in 2021, Julian changed the timestamps. He'd thought he was protecting his little brother, His wife found the casino receipts in November 2021. $280,000 gone lost at Vancouver casinos across the Canadian border, where U.S. banks didn't track his spending. She filed for divorce, took full custody of their 2 daughters. Julian didn't even get supervised visitation because the judge said he was a financial danger to the family. He'd borrowed $140,000 from loan sharks in Vancouver to cover the divorce settlement, 25% monthly interest. He thought he could win it back. He'd been wrong. Now they wanted $210,000 by September 15th. 2 months of compound interest had nearly doubled the debt. They told me if I don't pay. Julian whispered, they know where my ex-wife lives. They know my daughter's school in Spokane. They sent me photos, my 8-year-old getting off the bus. The FBI investigation had found 14 patient records Julian had altered. Not just Maggie Others going back to 2018, 18 federal counts of falsifying medical documents, 10 to 15 years per count. Julian could die in federal prison, and Dominic had offered him a way out. $300,000 in cash after Ellie was dead. Julian could pay off the loan shark's move to Canada disappear. But if Julian refused, Dominic would testify that Julian had been the mastermind, that Julian had the admin access, that the records showed Julian's fingerprints, not Dominic's. I'm trapped, Julian said. Every direction I turn, someone wants to destroy me. My ex-wife, the loan sharks, the FBI, Dominic, everyone. And the only way out is through you. He pulled a key from his pocket. Back door, Saturday morning before Dominic wakes up. I'll disable the security system from my admin access remotely. You can slip in, grab some of Owen's things, slip out. No confrontation. I stared at the key. It looked too perfect, too easy. And that's when I knew. Julian wasn't helping me escape. He was confirming I'd take the bait, giving Dominic advance notice so he could move up the timeline, ambush me early. This whole midnight meeting was theater designed to make me trust him. But Julian didn't know I was wearing a wire. Didn't know Derek was listening to every word. I'll meet Dominic on Saturday, I said carefully. Text me the time. Relief flooded Julian's face. Thank you, God, thank you. This is the right thing. He pressed the key into my hand and disappeared back through the south entrance, moving fast like he couldn't get away from his own confession quickly enough. I walked back to the surveillance van, my legs shaking. Derek pulled open the door. Inside, 2 agents sat with headphones on laptop screens glowing with audio waveforms. We got it all, Derek said. Conspiracy to commit murder. Premeditation. Fentanyl forged note timeline. But we can't arrest them yet. If we move now, Dominic lawyers up and Julian recants. We need to catch him in the act. With me as bait. With a decoy. Derek gestured to someone in the back of the van. A woman stepped forward into the light. Brown hair, same height, similar build, close enough that in dim lighting from across a room, Dominic might not notice the difference until it was too late. Dr. Hartwell. Derek said, "This is Dr. Sloan Mitchell. She's an ER physician at Swedish Medical, and she's volunteered to save your life." Judge Rachel Thornton called the courtroom to order at 9 a.m. sharp. Dominic sat at the plaintiff's table with his attorney, a man named Gregory Walsh, no relation to the HR director from the party who specialized in high-conflict custody battles. Walsh had the kind of expensive suit and practiced empathy that came with a $500 hourly rate. I sat across the aisle with Jamal, my hands folded on the table to keep them from shaking. Owen was somewhere in this building, maybe in a waiting room with a social worker, maybe already gone with Dominic's mother. I hadn't seen my son in 6 days, the longest 6 days of my life. Walsh stood. "Your Honor, this emergency petition concerns the immediate safety and well-being of a 6-year-old child. Dr. Ashford has documented 12 incidents over 6 months demonstrating Mrs. Hartwell's declining mental state. She has missed school events, forgotten to pick the child up from activities, worked excessive hours to the point of exhaustion. And on August 12th, she brought federal agents to the child's birthday party, creating a chaotic environment that resulted in a near-fatal medical emergency for her own sister-in-law." He paused, letting that sink in. Dr. Ashford is a concerned father protecting his son from an increasingly unstable mother. Dominic took the stand. He dressed carefully, khakis and a button-down, the concerned dad uniform. His voice was measured, reasonable. Your Honor, I love my wife, but over the past year, Ella has become paranoid. She's accused me of financial abuse despite the fact that she earns $900,000 annually. She's made wild claims about my medical practice. She's created an atmosphere of constant conflict that's affecting Owen. I don't want to do this, but I can't stand by and watch my son suffer. I wanted to stand up and scream that he was lying, that he'd tried to poison me, that he'd paralyzed patients and covered it up. But Jamal's hand on my arm kept me seated. Walsh called his first witness. The court calls Mr. James Rodriguez. Rodriguez took the stand looking uncomfortable in a suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. He avoided my eyes. Mr. Rodriguez, you attended the birthday party on August 12th. Yes. Can you describe Dr. Hartwell's behavior when Mrs. Ashford collapsed? Rodriguez shifted. She seemed tense, agitated. When Mrs. Ashford went down, Dr. Hartwell took control very quickly, almost aggressively. She was barking orders, wouldn't let anyone else help. It felt excessive. Walsh nodded sympathetically. Thank you. No further questions. Jamal stood. He didn't rush to the witness stand. He walked slowly, deliberately, giving Rodriguez time to get nervous. Mr. Rodriguez, what is your medical training? I don't have any. I'm a financial officer, MBA from Wharton. So you're not a physician? No. Not a nurse, not a paramedic, no medical training whatsoever. Correct. Then tell me, Mr. Rodriguez, when someone collapses in front of you with a suspected drug overdose, what is the appropriate medical response? Rodriguez's face flushed. I don't know. You don't know. Jamal let the words hang in the air. Yet you're here to testify that Dr. Hartwell's response was aggressive, that her behavior was excessive. Silence. Mr. Rodriguez, isn't it true that Dr. Hartwell is a level 1 trauma surgeon with 14 years of emergency medicine experience? Yes. And isn't it true that her aggressive response, taking control, giving orders, making rapid life-or-death decisions, is exactly what trauma surgeons are trained to do? Rodriguez said nothing. No further questions, Your Honor. Rodriguez practically fled the witness stand. Walsh called no more witnesses. Instead, he rested his case, clearly hoping the notebook and Rodriguez's testimony would be enough. Then Jamal called Dominic for cross-examination. Dr. Ashford, you operate a business called Cascade Pain Relief, LLC. Yes, a legitimate pain management clinic. And who funds this clinic? Dominic smiled confident. My wife and I co-invest. Co-invest. Can you show the court documentation of your financial contribution to Cascade Pain Relief? The smile faltered. Dominic glanced at Walsh, who whispered something. The investments are structured through various... Your Honor, may I approach? Jamal handed documents to the judge and to Walsh. These are corporate filings for Hartwell Medical Consulting, LLC, established March 2020. Mrs. Hartwell is sole owner. This entity has funded 100% of Cascade Pain Relief's operating costs, $280,000, over 2 years. Dr. Ashford's personal financial contribution is $0. The courtroom murmured. Judge Thornton studied the documents. Furthermore, Jamal continued, Cascade Pain Relief is currently under FBI investigation for Medicare fraud totaling $4.3 million. Is this true, Dr. Ashford? Judge Thornton's voice cut through the noise. Dominic's face had gone pale. Those are legitimate billing. The courtroom doors opened. Special Agent Derek Vaughn walked down the center aisle, FBI badge, visible on his belt carrying a manila folder. The bailiff moved to stop him, but Derek showed credentials and kept walking. Your Honor, I apologize for the interruption. Special Agent Derek Vaughn, FBI, Healthcare Fraud Task Force. I have a federal grand jury subpoena for Dr. Dominic Ashford. He handed the document to the bailiff, who passed it to Judge Thornton. She scanned it, her expression unreadable. Dr. Ashford, you are hereby summoned to appear before the United States District Court Grand Jury on Monday, August 21st at 9 a.m. to testify regarding Medicare fraud allegations. Derek turned and walked out. The courtroom erupted. Walsh was on his feet, objecting, but Judge Thornton banged her gavel. Order, we will take a 15-minute recess. When we reconvened, Jamal called me to the stand. I spoke for 40 minutes, my voice steady despite my hands shaking. Financial records showing Dominic had drained $2.1 million from joint accounts, wire transfers I'd never authorized, credit cards opened in my name, Vanessa's recordings 32 hours 18 minutes. Jamal played 3 excerpts, Dominic coaching Julian, discussions of the prescription mill, bragging about Maggie Brennan's sealed settlement, hospital records showing 6 patients with altered surgical notes, timestamps changed, outcomes blamed on patient non-compliance, all surgeries scheduled between 1 and 4 p.m., when Dominic's 2 martini lunches would have left him impaired. The courtroom was silent except for my voice and the court reporter's keyboard. Judge Thornton called a final recess. When she returned, her face was grim. This court has heard serious allegations today. FBI investigation, financial impropriety, falsified medical records. However, allegations are not convictions. Doctor. Ashford has not been charged with any crime. The evidence Dr. Hartwell has presented requires verification and cross-examination. My heart sank. Therefore, I am continuing this emergency custody hearing until Monday, August 21st at 9 a.m. In the interim, Owen will remain in Mr. Ashford's custody. Doctor. Hartwell is granted supervised visitation 4 hours daily, supervised by a court-appointed monitor. Both parties are ordered to refrain from contact except through counsel. Court is adjourned. The gavel banged. Dominic's side exhaled in relief. I felt Jamal's hand on my shoulder. As I walked out of the courthouse, Derek fell into step beside me. Saturday night, he whispered. We catch him trying to kill you. Monday morning, this ruling flips. Jamal was waiting by the courthouse steps. He handed me a folder. Claire Brennan dropped this off an hour ago. 6 families, 6 victims. They're all willing to testify. I opened it. The first page showed a photograph of a man in his 60s, smiling at a backyard barbecue. Below the photo, Samuel Torres deceased, November 2019. The Friday custody hearing had left me hollow 6 days without Owen stretching ahead like an endless corridor. But I couldn't afford to stay hollow. Derek's Saturday sting was hours away, and I needed Maggie Brennan's testimony to seal Dominic's fate. The Evergreen Rehabilitation Center sat 40 miles north of Seattle, tucked between Douglas firs and a lake that shimmered silver in the mid-morning sun. 4 stories of pale brick and wide windows, it looked less like a hospital and more like a retreat designed to offer hope rather than clinical sterility. Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of pine and antiseptic, a compromise between nature and necessity. A young woman in a navy blazer rose from a leather chair near the reception desk. Her eyes, dark, intelligent, weary, locked onto mine before I reached the front counter. Dr. Hartwell, she said, extending her hand. I'm Claire Brennan. My mom is expecting you. Claire was 26, a legal assistant at a downtown Seattle firm, and she moved with the controlled precision of someone who had spent 18 months cross-referencing medical records and tracking down witnesses. She led me to an elevator, pressed the button for the 3rd floor, and said nothing during the ascent. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of 2 people who'd both spent too long gathering evidence against men who'd sworn to do no harm. When the doors opened, we walked down a corridor lined with physical therapy rooms where patients worked on treadmills and parallel bars, their faces tight with concentration and pain. At the end of the hall, Claire opened a door to a private suite flooded with natural light. Maggie Brennan sat in a wheelchair by the window, her legs resting on a footrest sunlight pooling across her thighs. She wore gray sweatpants and a loose white t-shirt, her dark hair streaked with silver and pulled back in a ponytail. Her hands rested on the armrests, fingers tapping a slow rhythm, and when she looked up at me, her expression was neither welcoming nor hostile, just watchful. Dr. Hartwell, she said. Her voice was steady, the kind of voice that had survived 2 years of surgeries, infections, and rehabilitation without breaking. Claire said you wanted to talk. I stepped inside and Claire closed the door behind me. The room was sparse but comfortable. A hospital bed against one wall, a small table stacked with medical journals, a bulletin board pinned with photos of Claire as a child, a golden retriever, a house with a red front door. I pulled a chair closer to the window and sat down, feeling the weight of what I was about to confess settle into my chest. I've been paying for your treatment, I said, for the last 21 months, $288,000. Maggie's fingers stopped tapping. Claire, standing near the bulletin board, went very still. A BRT therapy. I continued. 180,000. The epidural stimulator implant, 62,000. The exoskeleton training, 46,000. I routed the payments through a non-profit foundation so the hospital wouldn't flag them. You were never supposed to know. Maggie's jaw tightened. Why? I met her eyes. Because I read your medical file. March 15th, 2021. Dominic operated on your L4 to L5 disc herniation at 1:45 in the afternoon. His blood alcohol was 0.11%, 3 times over the safe threshold for surgeons, which is 0. He severed 85% of your spinal cord. Julian altered the surgical timestamp from 3:42 p.m. to 11:18 a.m. to make it look like the operation happened before Dominic's lunch break. The hospital sealed your malpractice settlement for $1.2 million in March 2022 and forced you to sign an NDA. Dominic kept his license. He kept operating. Maggie's face flushed, her hands curling into fists. You knew 2 years ago and you didn't. I didn't know until March this year, I cut in. I found the records when I was investigating Dominic's Medicare fraud scheme. By then, you'd already signed the settlement, but I could still help you recover. I paused, letting the silence stretch. I'm not asking for gratitude. I'm asking you to testify. Claire stepped forward, her voice sharp. If my mom breaks the NDA, the hospital will sue her for breach of contract. She could lose everything. Not if the FBI subpoenas her, I said. Federal law supersedes private contracts. Derek Vaughn, the agent handling Dominic's case, can issue a grand jury subpoena Monday morning. The NDA becomes irrelevant. I looked at Maggie. But testimony comes with risk. Dominic will know you betrayed him. He'll retaliate if he can. Maggie's expression hardened. I've been in a wheelchair for 2 years because that man got drunk and destroyed my spine. You think I'm afraid of him? I think you're afraid for your daughter, I said quietly. That's why I'm offering you $384,000. Pay off your mortgage, $185,000. Clear Claire's medical school debt, $199,000. After Monday, you won't owe anyone anything. Maggie looked at Claire, who nodded once her jaw set. Then Maggie turned back to me. What do you need? Claire opened her messenger bag and pulled out a thick folder, setting it on the table between us. Inside were 6 case files, each one documenting a life Dominic had damaged or destroyed. Samuel Torres, 52, died 3 days after a November 2019 lumbar surgery from sepsis. Dominic hadn't followed sterile protocol. Linda Morrison, 38, left with permanent paralysis in her left leg after a July 2020 spinal fusion. Robert Grant, 61, nearly died from septicemia following a February 2021 arthroscopy. Jennifer Walsh, 44, lost function in her right arm after a September 2021 cervical surgery. Michael Brooks, 33, suffered permanent nerve damage from an April 2022 sports injury repair. Sarah Reynolds, 27, now wheelchair-bound after a November 2022 spondylolisthesis correction. Every surgery occurred between 1 and 4 p.m. Every file showed altered timestamps. Every victim had signed an NDA. I've contacted 4 of the 6 families, Claire said. They'll testify if they have legal protection. Jamal will represent all of them, I promised. Maggie exhaled slowly, her hands loosening on the armrests. For the first time since I'd walked into the room, I saw something other than anger in her eyes, something that looked almost like relief. When does this go to trial? Maggie asked. If we catch Dominic tomorrow night, if Derek's sting works, he'll be arraigned Monday morning, I said. The custody hearing reconvenes at 9 a.m. Your testimony could flip the judge's ruling. After that, the federal trial starts in October. We'll need all 6 families to testify. Claire pulled out a legal pad. What's the timeline for the subpoenas? Derek will file Monday morning. You'll have 72 hours to respond. The hospital can't touch you once federal law is involved. I leaned forward. But I won't lie to you, this will be public. Your names will be in court documents. Reporters will find you. The hospital will issue statements denying liability. It's going to be brutal. Good, Maggie said. Let them deny it. I have the medical records. I have the timestamps. I have the settlement agreement that proves they knew what Dominic did and paid me to shut up about it. Claire's pen moved across the legal pad, taking notes. What about the other families? Isabel Torres is ready, I said. Her husband died because Dominic perforated his bowel during surgery. Samuel threatened to report Dominic to the DEA 2 weeks before the operation. Isabel believes it was murder, not negligence. Maggie's eyes went wide. Murder. Julian will testify that Dominic killed Samuel deliberately to silence him, I said. If that testimony holds, Dominic faces first-degree murder charges on top of Medicare fraud and attempted murder. The room went silent. Outside the window, a pair of ducks landed on the lake ripples spreading across the silver water. Then let's make sure it holds, Maggie said. I left Evergreen at 2 p.m. driving south on I-5 with the lake receding in my rearview mirror. The day felt surreal, the sunlight too bright, the traffic too ordinary for what was coming. My phone buzzed once a text from Derek Sloan is briefed. Equipment ready. Stay off your phone after 8 p.m. At 8 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number, I answered. Dominic wants to meet you tonight. Julian said, his voice carefully neutral. His house, 9 p.m. Come alone, we'll discuss 50-50 custody. I knew it was a trap. I knew Derek had a plan. But I also knew that if I refused, Dominic would disappear and Owen would be lost to me forever. I'll be there, I said and ended the call. 3 seconds later, a text from Derek, don't come. We're sending Sloan. I sat in my car in the hotel parking lot staring at that text for a long time. Then I typed back, catch him. What happened next changed everything. Before I show you the FBI footage of Dominic crushing 30 pills into my wine, before you see the moment 6 agents burst through his ceiling and floor, I need to know you're ready. Comment 10 below. Fair warning, what comes next is partially reconstructed. If you're not comfortable with that, stop here. I watched Dr. Sloan Mitchell wearing my coat, my scarf, my perfume walk up the front steps of the house I'd been locked out of 6 days ago. I was 400 yards away, sitting in Derek's surveillance van, staring at a wall of monitors that showed every angle of the Ashford estate. 3 hidden cameras inside the house cameras I'd installed through my LLC back in July before Dominic changed the locks. 1 body-worn camera clipped to Sloan's collar, and a GPS tracker embedded in her panic wristband. Derek sat beside me, headset on, coordinating 6 agents positioned around the property. 2 in the attic they'd entered through the roof vent Thursday night. 2 in the basement accessed via the sewer grate. 2 at the front and back doors. The van smelled like coffee and adrenaline. Dr. Mitchell. Derek said into his radio, his voice steady. If he deviates from the script knife gun physical force, we breach in 30 seconds. Those 30 seconds will be dangerous. Sloan's voice crackled back through the speaker, calm as a surgeon in an operating room. I handled gunshot wounds in Kandahar, Agent Vaughn. I can handle 30 seconds. She was 39, a former Naval Reserve medical officer, 2008 to 2014. And she looked enough like me to pass under porch light, same height, same build, same dark hair pulled into a low bun. Beneath my coat, she wore a level 3A soft body armor vest capable of stopping a .44 Magnum round, and the panic wristband on her left wrist could summon the breach team with a single press. Derek had briefed her for 2 hours. She'd memorized the house layout, Dominic's vocal patterns, and the exit routes. She was, as Derek put it, the best decoy I've ever worked with. On the center monitor, Sloan reached the front door and pressed the doorbell. 8:50 p.m., right on schedule. Dominic opened the door within seconds, his smile wide and welcoming. "Elle, you came. I knew you'd see reason." Sloan stepped inside without a word. I held my breath. Dominic led her into the study, the same room where I'd signed our marriage license 7 years ago, where Owen had taken his first steps, where Dominic had kissed me the night before our son was born. Now it was the site of an attempted murder. The hidden camera above the bookshelf captured Dominic in profile navy sweater, gray slacks, polished loafers. He looked like a man hosting a dinner party, not a man planning to kill his wife. He poured 2 glasses of red wine from a bottle on the desk. Cabernet Sauvignon, our anniversary wine. "I need to use the restroom." Sloane said, her voice a near-perfect match for mine, slightly hoarse as if from crying. Of course, Dominic said. Down the hall. Sloane disappeared from the study camera. Dominic waited until her footsteps faded, then moved to the desk drawer. He opened it slowly as if afraid the hinges might squeak and pulled out a small Ziploc bag containing white pills. 30 of them. I recognized the shape even on the grainy monitor. Fentanyl, 100 micrograms each. Prescription strength. Dominic crushed them with a metal spoon, methodically grinding the pills into fine powder, then tipped the powder into the wine glass on the left side of the desk, the glass meant for L. He stirred with the spoon handle, dissolving the powder until the wine looked untouched. 3 milligrams of fentanyl, enough to stop a heart in under 5 minutes. We have him, I whispered. Derek nodded, speaking into his radio. Stand by, target has dosed the drink. Sloane returned to the study, her footsteps measured. Dominic handed her the poisoned glass. To new beginnings, he said, raising his own glass. Sloane lifted the glass toward her lips. Breach, breach, breach. Derek's voice exploded through the radio. The ceiling above Dominic's head collapsed. 2 agents dropped from the attic in tactical gear boots, hitting the hardwood floor with synchronized thuds. The floor beneath Dominic's feet shattered as 2 more agents burst up from the basement through a pre-cut trapdoor. The front and back doors slammed open simultaneously, agents flooding the hallway with AR-15 raised. FBI, hands up, hands up. Dominic lunged for the desk drawer. An agent tackled him sideways, slamming him into the bookshelf. Law books tumbled to the floor. Another agent yanked the drawer fully open, revealing a preloaded syringe filled with clear liquid, 10 milligrams of fentanyl, enough to kill in seconds, and a single sheet of paper. Derek pulled on latex gloves and lifted the paper carefully. It was a typed suicide note printed on my stolen laptop, the one Dominic had taken from my office in July. I poisoned Vanessa. I can't live with the guilt. I'm sorry, Owen. Backup plan, Derek muttered. Inject her if the wine failed. Stage it as a break-in suicide. Dominic twisted in the agent's grip, shouting, You have no proof. You have nothing. I was protecting myself from a mentally unstable woman. We have everything, Derek said. He gestured toward the body-worn camera on Sloane's collar, toward the hidden cameras, recording every second toward the wine glass with 3 milligrams of fentanyl dissolving in Cabernet. Attempted murder, conspiracy, Medicare fraud. And now... He turned toward the hallway as another agent escorted Julian Ashford into the study. Julian looked smaller than I remembered, his shoulders hunched, his face gray. He wore a wire beneath his scrub's FBI issue, placed Thursday night when he'd signed his plea agreement in exchange for testimony. Julian looked at his brother, and for a moment I thought I saw regret flicker across his face. I'm sorry, Dominic, Julian said quietly, but I can't let you kill anyone else. Dominic's face went white. You're lying. You're my brother. You're my brother. Julian interrupted. And you planned this for 3 weeks. You told me, if L.A. dies, I'll have Owen the house and $900,000 in life insurance. You asked me to falsify the security camera timestamps to create an alibi. He paused, swallowing hard. And in 2019, you killed Samuel Torres. He threatened to report your prescription mill to the DEA. You perforated his bowel during surgery on purpose. He died 3 days later from sepsis. You told me, problem solved. Silence filled the study. Even the FBI agents went still. Dominic lunged toward Julian, but 2 agents restrained him. You bastard, you were there. You helped me. I falsified the records, Julian said. I covered for you because I was afraid, but I won't cover for murder. He looked at Derek. I signed a plea deal Thursday night. I'll testify to everything. Derek cuffed Dominic's wrists behind his back, reading him his Miranda rights in a voice stripped of emotion. Dominic Ashford, you are under arrest for attempted murder, first-degree murder, Medicare fraud, conspiracy, and evidence tampering. You have the right to remain silent. Dominic twisted toward the dark window of the surveillance van, his face contorted with rage. You'll never prove anything. I have the best lawyers in Seattle. I have money. I have resources. I stepped out of the van and into the floodlights holding a tablet in both hands. Dominic's voice cut off mid-sentence. On the tablet screen, a PDF document titled Ashford Family Trust, Beneficiary Owen Hartwell Ashford, total value $31 million. I met Dominic's eyes across the driveway. "Your lawyers won't matter," I said, "because I just found your trust fund." Derek set a tablet on the metal table between us and pressed play. The screen flickered to life, and my own face appeared recorded 2 hours earlier in the FBI surveillance van before Sloan Mitchell walked into that house wearing my coat and my perfume. I looked calm in the video, almost clinical the way I looked when explaining a surgical procedure to a patient's family. But this wasn't about saving a life. This was about dismantling one. "Dominic," my recorded voice said, "have you ever wondered why your startup raised $1.2 million so easily? Why the mortgage on a $4.8 million estate was approved despite your $380,000 in personal debt? Here's the truth." Dominic sat across from Derek, his wrists still cuffed in front of him, his navy sweater wrinkled and stained with dust from the attic breach. His face was pale, his jaw tight, but he hadn't said a word since the FBI van pulled into the station. Now his eyes locked onto the screen. "Your father died in 2018. I continued in the video. "Richard Ashford, real estate developer, built half the luxury condos in Bellevue. He left behind a trust fund worth $31 million, $18.6 million for you, $12.4 million for Julian. But there was a condition." I paused, letting the silence stretch. The trust required a responsible beneficiary clause. Until you turned 45 in 2027. Your father knew about your gambling problem, Dominic. He knew you lost $150,000 in Vegas in 2015. He knew I paid that debt with my signing bonus from Swedish Medical Center. So he made me the trustee. Dominic's hands curled into fists on the table. "I've controlled every dollar you've accessed since 2018, I said. "Every single dollar." The video cut to a spreadsheet on the screen line after line of disbursements from the Ashford Family Trust. I'd pulled the records from the New York law firm that managed the fund, and I'd spent 3 hours Thursday night organizing them into a timeline Derek could use in court. "The house in Queen Anne," I said. $4.8 million, purchased in 2019 with trust funds. Title held by the trust, not by you. You're an occupant, Dominic, not an owner. Another line on the spreadsheet. "The Porsche Cayenne, $120,000. Trust disbursement, March 2020. Another line. "Your medical device startup, $1.2 million in seed capital. Trust disbursement, June 2021. The venture capital firms didn't invest in you, they matched funds I'd already committed from the trust. You thought you were a successful entrepreneur. You were spending my money." Dominic's breathing quickened. "Broadmoor Golf Club membership, $80,000 a year. Trust disbursement. Owen's tuition at Lakeside School, $45,000 a year. Trust disbursement. The Norwegian cruise we took for our 5th anniversary, $12,000. Trust disbursement." I leaned closer to the camera in the recording, my voice dropping. "You earn $520,000 a year as a surgeon, Dominic, but you spend over $2 million. The difference came from the trust. And you never asked where the money came from because you assumed you deserved it." Derek glanced at Dominic. The man's face had gone from pale to gray. "On August 14th, I said in the video, the day after you locked me out of the house, I filed an emergency petition with the law firm in New York. I presented evidence $4.3 million in Medicare fraud, a recorded confession from Julian about your plan to kill me, medical records showing 6 victims of your malpractice, including Samuel Torres, who you murdered in 2019. I let that word murdered hang in the air. The firm agreed to freeze all disbursements pending an investigation. As of August 14th, you no longer have access to the trust fund. The spreadsheet disappeared, replaced by a balance sheet. Your personal assets, I said. $68,000 in your checking account, $280,000 in your 401k, minus $380,000 in credit card debt. Your net worth, Dominic, is negative $32,000. The video zoomed in on my face. You thought you were rich. You thought you had power. But you were living in a house I controlled, driving a car I paid for, building a company with my money. And now, I smiled, and it wasn't kind. Now you have nothing. Dominic lurched forward in his chair. You can't. That's my inheritance. My father left that money for me. Your father left the money in a trust? Derek interrupted, his voice flat. With a misconduct clause. Doctor. Hartwell, as trustee, has the legal authority to suspend disbursements if the beneficiary engages in criminal activity, gambling, or behavior that threatens the trust's integrity. You tried to murder your wife, Dr. Ashford. That qualifies. Dominic's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The video continued. I also filed a guardianship designation with King County Superior Court. I said, if I die or lose custody of Owen, he will go to my mother in Portland, not to you. Patricia Hartwell, retired school teacher, clean record, stable home. The court will prioritize her over a felon facing life in prison. I leaned back in the video, folding my hands. You wanted me dead because you thought it would give you everything. Owen, the house, the $900,000 in life insurance, control of the trust. But I made sure that even if you killed me, you'd still lose. Owen would go to my mother. The trust would go to a court-appointed guardian. The insurance money would be frozen under the Slayer rule. You would be left with nothing but a murder conviction and a public defender. The screen went black. Derek let the silence settle for a long moment, then spoke. Dr. Ashford. On Monday morning, 6 families will file civil lawsuits against you. Samuel Torres, wrongful death. Linda Morrison, permanent paralysis. Robert Grant, sepsis and chronic pain. Jennifer Walsh, loss of function in her right arm. Michael Brooks, nerve damage. Sarah Reynolds, lifetime wheelchair dependency. Each lawsuit is seeking between $2 and $5 million in damages. That's $12 to $30 million total. Derek tapped the tablet. You don't have $12 million. You don't have $2 million. You have negative $32,000. Your wife just offered Maggie Brennan $384,000 to testify and break her NDA, Mrs. Brennan will tell the jury you operated drunk, severed her spinal cord, and then paid Julian to bury the evidence. The other 5 victims will testify that you did the same to them. Dominic's face was gray now, the color of wet concrete. Derek stood. You'll be arraigned Monday morning on charges of attempted murder, first-degree murder of Samuel Torres, conspiracy, Medicare fraud, and evidence tampering. I suggest you contact the public defender's office tonight. You're going to need them. He opened the interrogation room door and gestured for me to enter. I stepped inside, my heels clicking on the linoleum floor. Dominic looked up at me, and for the first time since I'd met him 7 years ago, I saw something other than confidence in his eyes. I saw fear. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. I turned and walked out of the room, and I didn't look back. Monday would bring a different kind of justice. Judge Rachel Thornton reconvened the hearing at 9 o'clock sharp. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. Pale wood paneling, fluorescent lights, a gallery with only a dozen seats, but the weight of what was about to happen felt enormous. Dominic's chair sat empty beside his attorney. He was being held without bail at Federal Detention Center SeaTac, awaiting arraignment on attempted murder charges. Gregory Walsh, Dominic's lawyer, rose immediately. Your Honor, I request a continuance. My client was arrested Saturday night under extraordinary circumstances. I haven't had adequate time to review. Denied. Judge Thornton said, her voice flat. Mr. Walsh, your client was arrested for attempting to murder the mother of his child. This hearing will proceed. The safety of Owen Hartwell Ashford is paramount. Walsh sat down, jaw tight. Jamal Reeves stood carrying a tablet and a thick folder of exhibits. Your Honor, we have substantial new evidence that demonstrates Mr. Ashford is an imminent danger to both Dr. Hartwell and their son. He pressed play on the tablet. The screen on the courtroom's monitor flickered to life, showing body camera footage from Saturday night. I watched Judge Thornton's face as the video played Dominic crushing 30 white pills into powder, tipping the powder into a wine glass, stirring until it dissolved. The timestamp read 8:53 p.m. The video cut to Dominic handing the glass to a woman who looked like me, Dr. Sloan Mitchell, wearing my coat and scarf and saying, "To new beginnings." Then the ceiling collapsed. FBI agents dropped from the attic, shattering the floor from below, flooding the room with tactical gear and assault rifles. FBI hands up. Dominic lunging for a desk drawer. An agent tackling him to the ground. Judge Thornton watched in silence, her expression unreadable. Forensic analysis. Jamal continued pulling up the next exhibit. Confirms 3 milligrams of fentanyl in that wine glass, a lethal dose. Also recovered a preloaded syringe containing 10 milligrams of fentanyl in this. He displayed a typed document on the screen. A forged suicide note printed on Dr. Hartwell's stolen laptop. Fingerprints on the keyboard match Mr. Ashford. The note reads, "I poisoned Vanessa. I can't live with the guilt. I'm sorry, Owen." Walsh stood. "Your Honor, this is evidence from an ongoing criminal case. It's prejudicial. It's directly relevant to the safety of this child," Judge Thornton interrupted. Objection overruled. Jamal submitted Julian Ashford's sworn affidavit, next 5 pages, detailing Dominic's murder plot, the promise of $300,000 from my life insurance, and the premeditated killing of Samuel Torres in 2019. Then came excerpts from Vanessa's recordings, Dominic's voice clear as day saying, "If we can get Ellie committed to a psychiatric hold, I'll have full custody and the house. Julian, you alter the hospital records. Make it look like she's unstable." Judge Thornton's face hardened. Jamal presented the financial evidence, $4.3 million in Medicare fraud, $2.1 million stolen from my accounts and trust fund disbursements, 6 falsified surgical reports with timestamps altered by Julian to hide Dominic's post-lunch drinking. Forensic IT analysis confirmed the alterations. Every piece of evidence stacked higher a tower of Dominic's crimes that Walsh couldn't knock down. Then came the witnesses. Vanessa appeared via Zoom, her face pale, a hospital bracelet still visible on her wrist. "My brother tried to kill me on August 12th with a sedative overdose," she said, her voice steady. 8 days later, he tried to kill his wife. I will testify at his criminal trial. Claire Brennan stood next, holding a folder. "My mother, Maggie Brennan, was paralyzed by Dr. Ashford's negligence in March 2021. He operated drunk blood alcohol 0.11%. The hospital paid $1.2 million to silence us. We represent 6 families who are victims of his malpractice and falsified records." Finally, FBI agent Derek Vaughn took the stand, his badge clipped to his belt. "Dr. Ashford is charged with attempted murder of Dr. Ella Hartwell conspiracy Medicare fraud totaling $4.3 million and involuntary manslaughter for the death of Samuel Torres in 2019. He is currently detained without bail awaiting trial." Walsh tried to object, tried to cross-examine, but there was nothing left to argue. The evidence was overwhelming. Judge Thornton removed her glasses and looked directly at Walsh. "Mr. Walsh, your client attempted to murder the mother of his child in front of federal agents. He faces charges for fraud, manslaughter, and conspiracy. He has demonstrated a sustained pattern of violence, manipulation, and deceit spanning 5 years. I find that Dominic Ashford poses an imminent and ongoing danger to Owen Hartwell Ashford." She put her glasses back on and read from her notes. "Effective immediately, I am terminating Dominic Ashford's parental rights pending the outcome of his criminal trial. Full legal and physical custody of Owen is awarded to Dr. L. Hartwell, Mr. Ashford's visitation rights are revoked entirely. He will have 0 contact with the child. I am also ordering a court-appointed child psychologist to work with Owen over the next 6 months to address any trauma resulting from this situation." She banged her gavel once. "This hearing is adjourned." The courtroom doors opened. My mother, Patricia, entered holding Owen's hand. He was wearing his favorite dinosaur t-shirt and sneakers, his eyes red-rimmed but dry. When he saw me, he broke free from Patricia's grip and ran. I knelt and caught him, pulling him into my arms for the first time in 10 days. He buried his face in my shoulder. "Mom," he whispered, his voice muffled, "can we go home now?" I held him tighter, my eyes burning. "Yes, baby, we're going home." Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed the steps. I carried Owen down, carefully shielding his face from the cameras. A woman with a microphone pushed forward. "Dr. Hartwell's 6 families just filed an $8.4 million lawsuit against your husband. Will you testify?" I stopped, turned toward the camera. Owen was still in my arms, his head resting on my shoulder. Yes, I said, at every hearing, for every victim. This ends here. 2 months after the custody hearing, I sat on the witness stand facing a federal prosecutor in a courtroom that smelled like old wood and fluorescent light. Dominic sat 20 feet away at the defense table, his arms crossed over a gray suit, his face blank. The gallery behind me was packed victims' families in the front rows, reporters in the back, FBI agents lining the walls. I'd been on the stand for 8 hours over 2 days, and the defense attorney was still trying to break me. Dr. Hartwell. He said, pacing in front of the jury box, "You had administrative access to Swedish Medical Center's patient records. You could have altered those surgical timestamps yourself." I kept my voice steady. The FBI's forensic IT analysis confirms that Julian Ashford altered the records, not me. The metadata shows his user ID, his workstation, his login timestamps between 2 and 4 a.m. on 6 separate occasions in 2021 and 2022. You paid Vanessa Ashford $50,000 in cash, the attorney continued. Isn't that a bribe to fabricate those recordings? It was an exit payment, I said. She needed money to leave Seattle after her brother tried to kill her. The recordings have been authenticated by the FBI's Audio Forensics Lab voice analysis, confirms Dr. Ashford's voice on 32 hours and 18 minutes of recordings. No splicing, no editing. The attorney leaned closer. You benefit significantly from your husband's conviction, don't you? The trust fund. Full custody of your son. I met his eyes. I benefit from my son being safe. That's all I care about. He tried for another hour, but there was nowhere left to go. The evidence didn't need me to defend it. It defended itself. Over the next week, the prosecution built its case with methodical precision. FBI agent Derek Vaughn testified, first walking the jury through 6 months of wiretaps financial records showing $4.3 million in Medicare fraud, and DEA logs documenting over 3,400 opioid prescriptions written to patients who didn't exist or were already dead. Then came the body camera footage from the sting operation, Dominic crushing 30 fentanyl pills into powder, stirring the powder into a wine glass, handing it to Dr. Sloan Mitchell while saying, "To new beginnings." The jury watched in silence as the ceiling collapsed and FBI agents swarmed the room. Maggie Brennan testified next, wheeling herself to the witness stand in the same chair she'd been using for 28 months. She was 48 years old and had been a high school teacher before Dominic severed 85% of her spinal cord. "He took my legs," she said, her voice shaking. "He took my career. He took my dignity. I loved teaching. I loved standing in front of a classroom. Now I can't stand for more than 30 seconds without collapsing." She looked at the jury. "Dr. Ashford operated on me drunk. Blood alcohol 0.11%. The hospital knew. They paid me $1.2 million to stay silent. I signed that agreement because I didn't think I had a choice, but I won't be silent anymore." 2 jurors wiped their eyes. Claire Brennan presented her 18-month investigation, next 6 victims, 6 falsified surgical reports, 6 lives destroyed or ended. Every surgery had occurred between 1 and 4 p.m. after Dominic's lunch break. Every timestamp had been altered by Julian to create an alibi. The pattern was undeniable. Vanessa Ashford appeared via video link, still pale from the sedative overdose 2 months earlier. The prosecution played excerpts from her recordings, Dominic's voice clear and calm, discussing how to get me committed to a psychiatric hold so he could take full custody of Owen. "Julian, you alter the hospital records. Make it look like she's unstable." The defense attorney objected, claiming the recordings were edited, but the FBI's forensic audio analysis showed no splicing, no manipulation. Just Dominic, in his own words, planning to destroy me. Then Julian took the stand. He'd signed a plea deal in exchange for his testimony, 5 years in federal prison instead of 15 permanent revocation of his medical license, and $1.2 million in restitution to the victims. He admitted falsifying 11 patient records, not just the 6 we'd identified publicly. He confirmed that Dominic had deliberately perforated Samuel Torres's bowel in November 2019 because Torres, a pharmacist, had threatened to report Dominic's prescription mill to the DEA. and he described in excruciating detail the 3 weeks Dominic spent planning my murder. My brother told me, Julian said, his voice barely audible, if Elle dies, I'll have Owen the house and $900,000. I helped him because I was afraid, but I won't help him kill anyone else. The prosecution's final witness was Isabel Torres. She was 61, gray-haired, dressed in black. She'd been married to Samuel for 38 years. When she took the stand, her hands were trembling. My husband went for routine back surgery in November 2019, she said. Herniated disc. Dr. Ashford said it was simple. Samuel went in healthy. He came out dying. She paused, accepting a tissue from the prosecutor. Dr. Ashford perforated my husband's bowel during the surgery. Samuel developed peritonitis and infection. 5 days later, he died from sepsis. Dr. Ashford told the hospital that Samuel's diabetes caused the infection. Her voice broke. But my husband didn't have diabetes. His medical records confirm it. Dr. Ashford lied. Julian falsified the autopsy report to say diabetic ketoacidosis instead of surgical complication. They covered it up. Isabel looked directly at Dominic. 2 weeks before the surgery, my husband told me he was going to report Dr. Ashford to the DEA. Samuel worked as a pharmacist. He noticed Dr. Ashford was prescribing hundreds of opioid pills every month to the same patients. Samuel told him, I'm going to the DEA unless you stop. 2 weeks later, my husband had surgery. She wiped her eyes. 2 weeks later, my husband was dead. The courtroom was silent. My husband tried to stop you from hurting people, Isabel said. You killed him for it. I sat in the gallery with my mother, my hand pressed over my mouth, tears streaming down my face. I'd reviewed Samuel's surgical records in August, but hearing Isabel's voice, hearing her describe the man she'd loved for 38 years, the man who'd tried to do the right thing, broke something open inside me. The defense called no witnesses. Dominic invoked his Fifth Amendment right and didn't testify. His attorney's closing argument was brief. The prosecution wants you to believe, Doctor. Ashford is a monster. But where's the proof he intended to kill Samuel Torres? You have Julian's word, a man who made a deal to save himself. You have Isabel's grief, but grief isn't proof. The prosecution's rebuttal was simpler. Samuel Torres threatened to report Dr. Ashford. 2 weeks later, he was dead. Dr. Ashford lied about the cause. Julian falsified the autopsy. You only cover up a crime. The jury deliberated for 14 hours. On a Saturday afternoon in early November, they returned a verdict guilty on all counts: Medicare fraud, conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, attempted murder, involuntary manslaughter. U.S. Marshals handcuffed Dominic and led him toward the side door. He turned back once his eyes finding mine across the courtroom. I stared back at him and felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, just exhaustion. The judge set sentencing for December 15th. Outside the courthouse, a reporter shoved a microphone in my face. Dr. Hartwell, how do you feel about the verdict? I looked at the camera, my voice hollow. I don't feel anything. I just want to go home to my son. I turned and walked away. Judge Patricia Hendricks opened the sentencing hearing by acknowledging the 6 families sitting in the front row of the gallery. Isabel Torres sat beside me, her hands folded in her lap. Maggie Brennan was in her wheelchair at the end of the row. Behind us, the courtroom was packed reporters and the back FBI agents lining the walls, members of the public who'd followed the case for months. Dominic sat at the defense table in a federal prison jumpsuit. His wrists shackled, his face blank. Before I impose sentence, Judge Hendricks said, I will hear from the victims. Maggie Brennan spoke first, wheeling herself to the microphone at the front of the courtroom. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled on the armrests of her chair. Dr. Ashford took my legs, my career, and my dignity, she said. I was a teacher for 20 years. I love standing in front of a classroom. Now I can't stand for more than 30 seconds without collapsing. The $2.1 million the court awarded me will pay for a lifetime of medical care, but it won't give me back what I lost. She looked at the judge. I hope my testimony helps other victims find the courage to speak up. Linda Morrison testified next, describing how Dominic's negligence had left her with permanent paralysis in her left leg. Then Robert Grant, who'd nearly died from sepsis and now lived with chronic pain. Jennifer Walsh, a pianist, had lost function in her right arm. Michael Brooks, a former athlete, could no longer run. Sarah Reynolds, 27 years old, would use a wheelchair for the rest of her life. Each story was its own tragedy. Each number, 1.2 million, 1 million, 1.3 million, was an attempt to quantify the unquantifiable. Finally, Isabel Torres stood. She was 61, dressed in black, her gray hair pulled back in a low bun. She walked slowly to the microphone and gripped it with both hands. "Dr. Ashford didn't just kill my husband," she said, her voice breaking. "He tried to erase Samuel by lying about his medical history. Samuel didn't have diabetes." "Doctor." Ashford lied to the hospital to cover up his mistake. He told them Samuel's diabetes caused the infection. But Samuel's medical records, the real records, prove he was never diabetic. Isabel paused, wiping her eyes. Samuel died because he tried to do the right thing. He worked as a pharmacist. He noticed Dr. Ashford was prescribing hundreds of opioid pills every month to the same patients. Samuel told him, "I'm going to the DEA unless you stop." 2 weeks later, my husband had surgery. 2 weeks later, he was dead. She looked at Dominic, who stared at the table. "Samuel was a hero," Isabel said. Dr. Ashford silenced him. Then she turned to me. "Thank you, Dr. Hartwell, for giving Samuel back his dignity." I pressed my hand over my mouth, tears streaming down my face. I nodded. Judge Hendricks removed her glasses and looked at Dominic. "Mr. Ashford, you were entrusted with people's lives. You betrayed that trust repeatedly over 5 years. You operated while intoxicated. You falsified medical records to cover your mistakes. You defrauded Medicare of $4.3 million. You conspired to distribute thousands of opioid prescriptions to patients who didn't need them or were already dead. You attempted to murder your wife to gain custody of your son and access to a trust fund. And you killed Samuel Torres, a man who tried to stop you from harming others." She put her glasses back on and read from her notes. Count 1 Medicare fraud, 84 months. Counts 2 through 14, concurrent, 84 months. Count 15, conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, 60 months concurrent with counts 1 through 14. Count 16, attempted murder of Dr. L. Hartwell, 180 months consecutive. Count 17, involuntary manslaughter in the death of Samuel Torres, 60 months consecutive. She looked up. Total sentence, 324 months, 27 years in federal prison. You will also pay $4.2 million in restitution to Medicare and $8.4 million in civil damages to the 6 families whose lives you destroyed. Your medical license is permanently revoked. You are prohibited from contacting Dr. Hartwell or your son Owen, and you must remain 500 yards away from them at all times if you are ever released. You will be eligible for release after serving 85% of your sentence, approximately 22 years. You will be 68 years old. She banged her gavel. "This court is adjourned." U.S. Marshals stood and led Dominic toward the side door. He glanced back, once his eyes scanning the gallery. I stared at him and felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction. Just the hollow certainty that this chapter of my life was finally over. Outside the courtroom, Jamal pulled me aside. The probate judge approved liquidating Dominic's portion of the trust fund, $18.6 million, he said. $4.2 million goes to Medicare restitution. $8.4 million goes to the 6 families. The remaining $6 million will be placed in an education fund for Owen. He'll have everything he needs for college, graduate school, whatever he wants. I nodded. The victims come first. Vanessa Ashford appeared beside us, her face pale but determined. She hugged me tightly. "Thank you for everything," she said. "I'm moving to Portland next week. I'm starting a nonprofit, Survivors of Family Betrayal. We'll help people who've been hurt by their own families. I want to turn this nightmare into something that helps others." I smiled, the first real smile I'd felt in months. "That's beautiful, Vanessa. If you ever need anything, call me." She smiled back, the first time I'd ever seen her smile. "You gave me my life back. Now I'm going to help others get theirs back too." Jamal added, "Julian was sentenced separately last month, 5 years. He'll be eligible for release in about 3.5 years with good behavior. His medical license is also permanently revoked, and he has to pay $1.2 million in restitution to the families." "Good." I said quietly. He enabled Dominic for years. He deserves to be held accountable. Jamal touched my shoulder. The system worked, Elle. It's not perfect, but it worked. I left the courthouse alone. Jamal and Derek had offered to walk with me, and Isabel had asked if I wanted to get coffee, but I needed to be by myself. I walked down to the Seattle waterfront, found a bench overlooking Puget Sound, and sat down. It was 4:30 in the afternoon, and the December sky was gray and heavy with rain. The water was choppy, dark, endless. My phone rang. Owen's child psychologist. "Mrs. Hartwell, I wanted to call you," she said. "Owen said something today during our session that I think you should hear." I held my breath. He said, "I'm proud my mom is a hero." I pressed the phone to my ear, tears streaming down my face. Not sadness this time. Relief, gratitude, pride. Owen was safe. The victims had been compensated. Dominic was in prison for the next 27 years. And my son thought I was a hero. I sat on that bench watching the gray water, and for the first time in 6 months, I thought maybe, just maybe, I could finally start healing. In January, a New York Times reporter called. By February, the story was everywhere. The reporter spent 3 hours interviewing me in a conference room at Swedish Medical Center, asking about the moment I discovered Dominic's Medicare fraud the night he tried to poison me. The months I'd spent gathering evidence while pretending everything was normal. She interviewed Maggie Isabel Clare and FBI agent Derek Vaughn. She reviewed 2,000 pages of court documents. The article ran in late January. Seattle surgeon's wife exposes $4.3 million Medicare fraud ring, saves own life. Within 48 hours, the Associated Press picked it up. Then CNN, NPR, Fox News. The Seattle Times published a follow-up doctor. Ellie Hartwell from Victim to Victor, how one woman brought down a medical predator. By mid-February, CBS's 60 Minutes had called. The segment aired on a Sunday evening. 15 million people watched. I sat at my kitchen table and told the anchor I had to protect my son and stop my husband from hurting more people. It wasn't heroism, it was survival. Maggie appeared in her wheelchair at Evergreen Rehabilitation Center, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. Dr. Ashford operated drunk blood alcohol 0.11%. He severed my spinal cord. I'll never walk again, but I won't stay silent anymore. Claire held up one of the falsified surgical reports. I investigated for 18 months. Dominic altered records to cover his mistakes. Julian changed timestamps. 6 people were harmed. 1 was killed. Isabel's voice broke when she spoke about Samuel. My husband tried to stop Dr. Ashford. Samuel threatened to report him to the DEA for prescribing thousands of opioid pills. 2 weeks later, Samuel was dead. Dr. Ashford perforated his bowel during surgery and lied about the cause. Dr. Hartwell gave my husband back his dignity. Derek explained the scope. $4.3 million in Medicare fraud. Over 3,400 opioid prescriptions. Dr. Ashford also attempted to murder his wife to gain custody of their son and access to a trust fund. The phone started ringing before the segment ended. In March, Cascade Bay Medical Center offered me chief of trauma surgery. The salary was $1.1 million, annually double what I'd been making. The CEO said my courage and integrity aligned with their institutional values. I understood what he really meant. My story was good, PR, but I didn't care. The position gave me a platform to implement the reforms I'd been drafting for months. Mandatory audits, whistleblower protections, peer review, transparency. On my first day in April, I stood in front of the trauma team and said, "I'm here because I believe in accountability. If you see something wrong, speak up. I will protect you." 3 weeks later, a resident reported a surgeon who'd operated with a hangover. I launched an investigation. The surgeon was suspended. The message was clear. In April, Claire and I launched the Hartwell Brennan Foundation. We funded it with $2.5 million from the liquidation of Dominic's portion of the trust fund. Our mission was simple: help victims of medical malpractice navigate a system designed to silence them. We built a website where people could report suspected fraud or falsified records. We connected victims with attorneys. We partnered with investigative journalists to expose patterns of negligence. In the first 3 months, we received over 340 complaints from across the country. Patients who suspected their doctors had operated while impaired. Families who believed records had been altered. Whistleblowers who'd been fired for speaking up. Claire hired a team, 3 attorneys, 2 paralegals, 5 investigators. By June 15, victims had filed civil lawsuits totaling $12 million. 8 doctors had been reported to state medical boards. 2 hospitals were under audit. We're giving victims a voice, Claire told me one afternoon. For too long, hospitals silenced them with NDAs. Not anymore. Dominic's life in prison was unraveling. He'd been transferred to Federal Correctional Institution CTAC in January. Within 2 weeks, 2 inmates, both former patients from his prescription mill who'd become addicted to the opioids he'd prescribed, recognized him and beat him badly enough that guards had to intervene. Broken ribs, a concussion, black eyes that took weeks to fade. The warden moved him to protective custody. 23 hours a day in a cell, isolated from the general population, with no visitors and no privileges. Jamal heard through a contact that Dominic was terrified, paranoid, barely eating. I felt nothing when Jamal told me. Julian, serving 5 years at a minimum security facility in Oregon, wrote me a letter in March. 3 pages handwritten, apologizing for enabling Dominic, for falsifying records, for helping plan my murder. He said he understood if I never forgave him. I read it once and filed it in a drawer. I didn't respond. Vanessa was thriving. Her nonprofit Survivors of Family Betrayal had grown to 2,400 members by June. She'd hired therapists to run support groups and published a memoir in May called Poison Trust: How My Brother Tried to Kill Me and His Wife and How We Survived. The book hit number 12 on the New York Times bestseller list. She sent me a signed copy with a note, "Thank you for giving me my life back. Now I'm helping others get theirs back too." Owen's psychologist called in late May. He's doing remarkably well. His anxiety has decreased significantly. He's making friends. He talks about you with pride. Owen was starting 2nd grade in September. He'd been in therapy for 9 months. One night, while I was tucking him in, he said, "Mom, I'm glad you're strong." I kissed his forehead. "I'm glad you're safe." In June, I received a letter from the Washington State Medical Board. Dr. Hartwell, we are forming a task force to investigate systemic medical record falsification across Washington state. Your expertise makes you the ideal candidate to serve as lead advisor. We aim to draft policy recommendations for the 2025 legislative session. Would you be willing to serve? I read it twice, my hand trembling, not with fear, but with purpose. I called Claire. I just got a letter from the Washington Medical Board. They want me to lead a task force on falsified records. That's incredible, Claire said. What did you say? I smiled, the first real smile I'd felt since sitting on that waterfront bench in December. I said yes, and I have a question for you. I paused. Are you ready to take this national? 1 year ago, I watched my husband poison his sister at our son's birthday party. Today, I watched Owen blow out 7 candles surrounded by the people who'd fought beside me. The backyard was full. 15 of Owen's 2nd grade classmates ran through the grass, chasing each other with water balloons. My trauma team from Cascade Bay stood near the grill, 8 surgeons who'd become friends, including Dr. Sloan Mitchell, the woman who'd walked into my house wearing my coat and saved my life. Maggie Brennan sat in her wheelchair near the patio table, Claire beside her, both smiling as they watched Owen open presents. Isabel Torres stood with my mother under the maple tree, the 2 of them talking quietly. Vanessa had driven up from Portland that morning, her memoir tucked under her arm, signed copies for anyone who wanted one. Derek Vaughn manned the grill, flipping burgers and pretending he wasn't an FBI agent. No one from Dominic's family had been invited. His parents had cut ties after the trial, too ashamed to acknowledge what their son had done. Julian was still in prison in Oregon. It was just us, the people who'd survived, the people who'd helped me survive. Owen stood in front of his dinosaur cake, 7 candles flickering in the August sunlight. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and blew them all out in one try. His classmates cheered. "What did you wish for?" one of the kids asked. Owen looked at me, then at Maggie, then at Isabel. "I wish that all the people my dad hurt would be happy again." The backyard went quiet. Isabel pressed a hand to her mouth. Maggie reached over and squeezed my arm. I knelt beside Owen and hugged him tightly. "That's a beautiful wish, sweetheart." He whispered in my ear, "Do you think it'll come true?" I pulled back and looked at him, this brave, kind 7-year-old boy who'd spent 9 months in therapy, learning how to sleep without nightmares, how to trust that I wouldn't disappear, how to understand that his father's choices weren't his fault. "I think," I said carefully, "that we're all trying to be happy again, and that takes time. But your wish helps." Owen nodded seriously, then ran off to join his friends. Maggie wheeled closer. She'd been working with a physical therapist for 18 months now. Her upper body strength had improved enough that she could transfer from her wheelchair to a car seat without help, and she'd started using a walker for short distances. The $2.1 million from the civil judgment had paid for everything: the best therapists, the adaptive equipment, a fully accessible apartment. She raised her glass of lemonade. "To Dr. Hartwell," she said loud enough that the adults turned to listen. "You gave me justice when no one else would. You paid my bills when I had nothing. You're proof that there are still people who fight for what's right." I shook my head. "I didn't do it alone. Every person here fought for what's right. We all deserved better than a system designed to protect predators. And we're going to keep fighting until that system changes." Vanessa raised her glass. "To fighting." Derek raised his. "To justice." Claire raised hers. "To transparency." We drank. Owen ran past with 3 of his friends, laughing, water balloons in hand, completely oblivious to the weight of what we were toasting. That was exactly how it should be. Later, while Owen was showing his classmates the treehouse Derek had helped me build in the backyard, I noticed the compass necklace around Owen's neck, a simple silver chain with a small engraved pendant. I'd replaced the camera-equipped dinosaur necklace months ago, once the trial was over and Dominic was locked away. Owen had picked out the compass himself. "It helps me find my way home," he told me when we bought it. Now, watching him climb the treehouse ladder, I understood what he'd meant. Home wasn't a place. It was safety. It was knowing that the people around you wouldn't hurt you. My phone buzzed. An email from the Washington State Medical Board. "Dr. Hartwell, your task force proposal has been approved. Budget $1.8 million annually. 5-year mandate to audit surgical records at every hospital in the state. Start date September 1st, 2024. I read it twice, then looked up at the backyard, at Owen laughing with his friends, at Maggie and Claire, talking with Isabel, at Vanessa, signing a copy of her memoir for one of the other parents, at Derek flipping burgers, at my mother pouring lemonade at Sloan, helping a kid retrieve a water balloon from the roof. I'd won. Not because I was smarter than Dominic, not because I was braver. I'd won because I'd asked for help, because Derek had believed me, because Vanessa had recorded her brother's crimes, because Claire had spent 18 months investigating, because Maggie had broken her NDA, because Jamal had fought for me in court. We had all won together. As the party wound down and parents started collecting their kids, Claire pulled me aside. "The medical board wants you to testify before the State Senate Health Committee in December," Hoyne, she said. "They're drafting a bill requiring independent surgical audits at every hospital that receives state funding." I looked at Owen, who was waving goodbye to his friends from the treehouse. "Tell them I'll do it," I said. Claire smiled. "I already did." I laughed a real laugh, the kind I hadn't been able to manage a year ago when I'd stood in this same neighborhood watching Vanessa collapse, knowing my husband had just tried to kill me. Owen climbed down from the treehouse and ran over, throwing his arms around my waist. "Best birthday ever, Mom." I kissed the top of his head. "I'm glad, baby. Can we do this again next year?" I looked around the backyard at the people who'd become my family, at the home I'd built from the ashes of the one Dominic had tried to burn down. "Yes," I said. "We can do this every year." My first day as lead advisor to the Washington State Medical Board began with a stack of files containing 3,200 surgeons. The task force had 12 members: forensic accountants, FBI liaisons, medical ethicists, and patient advocates. Claire Brennan joined as deputy director. She'd finished her law degree in May and passed the bar in July. Our mission was straightforward: audit surgical records at 47 hospitals across Washington state, identify patterns of falsification, and refer cases for prosecution. By November, we'd identified 14 surgeons with suspicious records. 2 cases were severe enough to refer to the FBI. One involved a cardiac surgeon in Spokane who'd altered timestamps on 38 procedures over 6 years. The other was an orthopedic surgeon in Tacoma who'd falsified complication rates to avoid malpractice insurance increases. In December, I testified before the Washington State Senate Health Committee. I sat at a long table facing 15 senators, a microphone in front of me, and described what Dominic had done. I explained how Julian had altered records with a few keystrokes, how 6 people had been harmed, how 1 had been killed, how the hospital had known and covered it up with settlements and NDAs. This isn't about one bad doctor, I said. It's about a system that protects institutions over patients. We need independent surgical audits at every hospital that receives state funding. We need mandatory reporting of falsified records. We need whistleblower protections so that nurses and residents can report dangerous conduct without losing their jobs. Senator Patricia Coleman leaned forward. Dr. Hartwell, what would you say to people who argue that this level of oversight is too expensive? I didn't hesitate. I'd say that my husband defrauded Medicare of $4.3 million, and that's just one doctor. I'd say that Samuel Torres died because he tried to report fraud and was murdered for it. I'd say that the cost of oversight is far less than the cost of letting predators operate unchecked. The room was silent for a moment. Then Senator Coleman nodded. Thank you, Dr. Hartwell. That's all the questions I have. The bill officially called the Surgical Transparency Act was drafted in January. It required independent audits of surgical outcomes at every hospital receiving state, funding mandatory reporting of altered records and whistleblower protections with penalties for retaliation. 5 other states contacted me in January: Oregon, California, Colorado, Minnesota, and New York. They wanted to replicate the task force model. Claire and I spent weekends on Zoom calls, walking them through our audit protocols, sharing templates, connecting them with forensic accountants who could identify timestamp alterations. We're building something national, Claire said one night as we reviewed audit results in my office. This started with Dominic, but it's going to save lives far beyond the people he hurt. Owen was thriving. I'd enrolled him in a progressive private school that emphasized social justice and emotional intelligence tuition, paid from the education fund Richard Ashford had left for him. Owen's teacher called me in October to say he'd written an essay about people who fight for what's right, and had included me, Maggie, and Isabel. He was making friends. He was sleeping through the night. His therapist said he was ready to drop down to monthly sessions. I started dating quietly in November, a hospital administrator I'd met at a medical ethics conference. We went to dinner twice, took Owen to the aquarium once. It was slow, careful nothing serious, but it was a reminder that I could trust someone again eventually. Dominic's final appeal was denied by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in January 2025. His 27-year sentence was upheld. He would be eligible for release in 2046 when he was 68 years old. I felt nothing when Jamal called to tell me, just a distant sense that a door had finally closed. In February, I received a letter from Maggie. Dr. Hartwell, today I stood up. For the first time in 4 years, I stood for 30 seconds. My physical therapist says I might be able to walk again in 2 to 3 years. This isn't a miracle, it's because of the epidural stimulator and the physical therapy you paid for. Thank you for giving me hope. Claire sent me a video. Maggie gripping parallel bars in a rehab gym, her legs trembling beneath her as she held herself upright for 30 seconds before sinking back into her wheelchair, tears streaming down her face. I watched it 3 times and cried for an hour. Not because it was a miracle, because it was science and justice. I knew the statistics. 30 to 40% of incomplete spinal cord injury patients regain some function with intensive therapy. Maggie had been paralyzed for 4 years. The epidural stimulator, the $62,000 device I'd helped fund, had been sending electrical signals to her spinal cord for 3 years, coaxing the surviving nerve fibers to reconnect. The activity-based therapy had kept her muscles from atrophying completely. This was what justice looked like. Not revenge, not Dominic rotting in a cell, but Maggie standing. Isabel rebuilding her life. Claire becoming a lawyer. Vanessa helping other survivors. Owen sleeping through the night. On March 1st, 2025, the Washington State Senate passed the Surgical Transparency Act 42-7. The governor signed it into law on April 1st. I received a handwritten note from Isabel Torres the next day. Samuel would be so proud. You turned his death into something that will save so many others. I pinned it to the wall in my office right next to the drawing Owen had made of a superhero holding a stethoscope. August 2025. Owen turned 8. 3 years had passed since the birthday party that changed everything. Isabel Torres had used the $384,000 Elle gave her to pay off her mortgage, cover her medical bills, and open a small bakery in Ballard Samuel's dream. The bakery was thriving now, 12 employees lines out the door on Saturday mornings. Isabel had named it Torres and Company, and she'd hung a photo of Samuel behind the register with a small plaque for the man who tried to do the right thing. In May, Maggie Brennan had walked 15 feet with a walker. Claire had posted the video online, Maggie gripping the walker's handles, her legs trembling, her physical therapist counting each step. The video went viral, 4.2 million views, hundreds of comments from other spinal cord injury survivors. Maggie had become a national advocate for spinal cord injury recovery, speaking at conferences, partnering with researchers, raising money for epidural stimulation devices. Vanessa had moved back to Seattle in March. Her nonprofit Survivors of Family Betrayal had opened a Seattle branch, and she'd taken a full-time position as executive director. She'd lost 60 pounds, looked healthier than I'd ever seen her, and was engaged to a nonprofit director she'd met in Portland. She'd invited me to the wedding in October. I'd said yes. In June, Julian Ashford had been granted early release after serving 3.5 years of his 5-year sentence. He'd moved to Montana, taken a job as a medical billing clerk. He was banned from hospital administration and sent me a final letter. I know I can never apologize enough. I hope someday you can forgive me. I told my therapist, I don't forgive him, but I'm not angry anymore. That's enough. Derek Vaughn had been promoted to Deputy Director of the FBI's Healthcare Fraud Division. He called the case against Dominic a model for interagency cooperation and had used it to train new agents. He still sent Owen birthday cards every year. Owen's 8th birthday party was at our house in Queen Anne. 20 guests, his classmates, my trauma team, Maggie and Claire, Isabel, Vanessa, Derek, my mother, Jamal, no one from Dominic's family. His parents had never reached out after the trial, too ashamed to acknowledge what their son had done. Owen blew out 8 candles and made a wish. When I asked him what he'd wished for, he said, I want to be a doctor like you, Mom, so I can help people who are hurt. I hugged him tightly, blinking back tears. Then Maggie stood up from her wheelchair. She gripped her walker, her physical therapist beside her for support, and took 15 slow, deliberate steps across the patio. Every guest stood and cheered. Owen clapped so hard his hands turned red. Isabel wiped tears from her eyes. Maggie reached the patio table and looked at me. I'll never run a marathon, she said, her voice strong. I'll never dance at my daughter's wedding without this walker. But I'm standing here today because Dr. Hartwell didn't just expose the man who hurt me. She paid for my recovery when no one else would. That wasn't charity. That was justice. I shook my head. You did the hard work, Maggie. I just made sure you had the resources. You gave me hope, Maggie said. That's worth more than $2.1 million. Later, after the guests had left and Owen was asleep, I stood on my back porch and looked at the city lights spreading out below Queen Anne Hill. 3 years ago, I'd stood in a backyard just like this one and watched my husband poison his sister. I'd thought my life was over. Instead, I'd discovered I was far stronger than I'd ever imagined. Not because I'd fought alone, but because I'd built an army of people who believed in justice. Dominic had taken 5 years of my life, 5 years of gaslighting, financial abuse, and fear. I'd taken the rest of his. That wasn't revenge. That was consequence. The next morning, I drove Owen, my mother, and Isabel to the waterfront. We rented a small boat and motored out into Puget Sound. Isabel had brought flowers, white roses, Samuel's favorite. We scattered them on the water one by one, watching the petals drift on the current. Owen asked, Mom, is Mr. Torres in heaven? I thought about it. I think he's wherever good people go when they're treated unjustly, and I think he knows we're fighting to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. Isabel squeezed my hand. Thank you, she whispered. We motored back to shore. Owen ran ahead to the car, laughing the sun on his face. I looked at Isabel. Samuel would be proud of what you've built. He'd be proud of what you've built, Isabel said. The task force, the foundation, the law. You turned his death into something that will save lives. I nodded. That's all any of us can do. Turn the worst moments into something that matters. Owen called from the parking lot. Mom, let's go home. I smiled. Coming, baby. I took one last look at Puget Sound, the gray water, the distant mountains, the ferries cutting white lines through the waves, and walked toward my son. We went home. Looking back, I realized that family betrayal isn't just about the crime. It's about the silence that protects it. Dominic betrayed his patients, his profession, and his family. Julian betrayed his oath as a doctor. But the hospitals that covered up their mistakes, that was family betrayal on a systemic level, institutions choosing profit over people. I learned 3 things through this nightmare. First, God gives us strength. We don't know we have until we need it. When I thought I couldn't survive another day, I found the courage to ask for help. That wasn't luck, that was grace. Second, family revenge is tempting, but it's not justice. Many survivors fall into the trap of family revenge, wanting to destroy the person who hurt them. But I didn't destroy Dominic for revenge. I exposed him because other people's lives were at stake. Family revenge is personal and empty. Justice is collective and healing. God calls us to seek justice, not vengeance. Third, forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. I may never forgive Julian for what he enabled, but I've released the anger because carrying it only hurts me. God can judge him. I don't have to. My advice: don't be like me. Don't wait until your life is in danger to speak up. If you see something wrong at work, at home, in your family, say something. Don't let fear of family betrayal keep you silent. Don't let loyalty become complicity. And remember, you are stronger than you think. With God's help, with the right people beside you, you can survive anything. If this story moved you, please comment below, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to this channel for more true stories of survival and justice. Thank you for staying with me until the end. Disclaimer: future stories may contain fictionalized elements created for educational purposes. If this content isn't for you, please choose something more suitable.